Step by Wicked Step by Anne Fine. Read by Richard Mitchley. Even before they reached the haunted house, the night had turned wild. The face of the minibus driver flickered from blue to white under the lightning. Each peal of thunder made the map in Mr. Plumley's hand shiver. And the 5 leftover pupils from Stagfire School peered anxiously through the rain-spattered windows into the storm and the black night. "There! Where? Over there, see? Up that overgrown driveway." As the driver swung the minibus into the looming hole between the wrought-iron gates, the 3 on the right-hand side of the bus read out the words on the peeling sign. "Old Harwick Hall. Absolutely private. No hawkers, no circulars." Colin, who had been quiet the whole journey, suddenly spoke. "Friendly. Don't even want you coming up their garden path to give them a free paper." "Some garden path." Everyone stared out, flinching as the twisted fingers of trees scraped at the glass. After the terrible journey, somebody might have said, "I'm glad we're here," but no one was sure they were. If they'd been lucky enough to travel on the bus with everyone else, they might have felt more of a crowd. They might have had fewer misgivings. But just the 5 of them, picked out by Miss Odell after a quick glance at her list, and herded in the minibus with Mr. Plumley like leftovers shoved in the fridge, well, that was different. Another brilliant flash lit up a jagged stone tower strangled by ivy. "Is that it?" "No, that's the old chapel." They'd all heard about the ruined chapel. It was forbidden ground, and if you were caught climbing on its perilously steep slopes, you were sent home, even though this was a school week. All they could see of it from the minibus as they swept by was a dark silhouette of tumbled stone. "Cripes!" the driver said suddenly, stabbing at the brakes. Everyone turned from the side windows and stared ahead. "There it is! Strick!" Through the arcs of the wipers, they could make out a towering mansion with dunce-hatted turrets standing black against storm clouds. Moonlight flickered eerily against its dark windows. Creepsville! Maybe it really is haunted. No one had truly believed it up till now. It was just something the last group always came back with. Tales of strange shadows and footsteps, and eerie figures in white gowns melting through walls. Each year, at least 3 people in every class swore, spit and hoped to die, that they had seen a ghost. The driver swung round in her seat. "Well," she asked Mr. Plumley, "are you getting them all out?" Not giving him time to answer, she took charge herself, sliding open the side door. Everyone spilled out. They took the luggage from the back of the van. "Don't stop to look for your own bag," the driver ordered. "Just take the nearest," and splashed through the puddles to the shelter of the steep-roofed porch. Here, out of the driving rain, they exchanged battered rucksacks and brand-new holdalls as the driver took off in a spray of wet gravel, and their teacher stared miserably at the huge oak and iron door. "Ring the bell, Mr. Plumley," prompted Claudia. "What bell?" Quite right. No bell that anyone could see. "Try knocking, then." Robbo knocked the hardest, but it was clear to everyone that if they could barely hear his fierce hammering over the whine of the wind, no one inside would even notice it. "Try the handle," suggested Pixie. Obediently, Mr. Plumley twisted the heavy ring handle and pushed. The door grated open over a black and white tiled floor that looked like a huge checkerboard glazed with storm water. "Try the lights." None of the switches did anything. Ralph and Pixie took turns at flicking them up and down, but no lights came on anywhere. "Storm damage, I expect," said Ralph. Mr. Plumley was horrified. "You don't suppose that they'll be off all night? It's not going to be easy settling you all in one of the dormitories in the pitch dark." The thunder crashed so loud that nobody cared to mention they'd all made plans to sleep in different rooms. "We'll go up these stairs here. Ouch!" Poor Mr. Plumley had marched straight into a giant floor-to-ceiling looking-glass that reflected the wide curve of stairs sweeping out of the shadows behind them. He turned to face the other direction. "This way," he said. The 5 of them trailed up the vast staircase after Mr. Plumley. Each livid flash of lightning through the stained glass above their heads lit their way further up and further on through the huge, echoing mansion. Fronds of strange plants stretched from their pots and fingered them as they passed. Disturbed ornaments chattered on mahogany sideboards, and grim Harwicks of all ages stared down at them through hardened, oil-painted eyes. "Let's try up here." It was yet another staircase, narrow and bare. They'd left the portraits and the carpets behind them now. Their footsteps clattered on the wooden steps as they spiralled up and up. "Ah, this will do." He had pushed open a door and found a little tower room with beds pointing neatly towards the centre from 5 of the 6 walls. "But, Mr. Plumley—" Pixie nudged Claudia hard. Claudia might want the 2 of them to go off on their own, up some other lonely dark tower, rather than break one of the strictest of the rules. Each bedroom is for either girls or boys. But on a night like this, with Miss Odell and the others still not here, Pixie preferred safety in numbers. Mr. Plumley turned back. "What is it, Claudia?" Claudia's heart stopped, as sheets of rain lashed at the window panes and the wind howled. "Nothing, Mr. Plumley." It wasn't their fault if he didn't know the rules. "You settle down. I'll go and see if I can find what the housekeeper has left us for supper." A peal of thunder stopped him at the door. "Anyone want to come with me?" he asked them hopefully. "No, thank you, Mr. Plumley," everyone said. He set off bravely down the narrow stairs. Pixie sat on a bed. "Horrible," she said. "Horrible, horrible, horrible." Nobody knew if she meant the bed, the house, the storm, or all 3. Nobody asked. Robbo propped the door open with his bag and went on a prowl up 2 or 3 more stairs and round another bend. His voice echoed cheerfully through the next roll of thunder. "There are 2 more beds up here, and a bathroom. The bath's enormous. It has feet with claws." "I know what I need," said Claudia. "Is there a—" "Yes!" More lightning flashed. "And it has a gold chain with a china handle that says pull." Claudia was out of the door in a moment. Pixie ran after her, and Colin went up too. Ralph made sure that Robbo's holdall stayed in the doorway, propping it open till they were all safely back again. Then they sat in the dark, with their legs dangling over the ends of the beds, a tight little circle, like campers round a dead fire. "Should we unpack?" asked Robbo. "We 3 could stay here, and Claudia and Pixie could have those 2 beds up the stairs." "What's the point?" Ralph asked. "We all have plans to share with other people. We'll only have to pack up and move when Miss Odell and the others come." "If they come." "What's the time?" Ralph held the face of his watch towards a window, waiting for lightning. 9:45, he told them at the next flash. "Lights out by 10:30, Claudia reminded them. "That's all right," Pixie said bitterly. "They probably still will be." She hugged herself as another brilliant flare of light ripped open the sky and flooded the tower room with incandescent silver. They all looked paler in the dark that followed, but Colin was pointing at the wall just behind Claudia's head. "Look!" Everyone turned. "What?" "I can't see anything." "What's the matter?" "Look!" Colin said again. "In the wall! It's a door! There's a door hidden in the wall!" "Where?" "There's nothing there, Colin." "Oh, yes, there is. I saw it." He crawled over Claudia's bed. In the dark they could barely make out the shadow of his hands running up and down over the broad stripes of ancient wallpaper. "I can't see anything." "Wait," Colin told them. "Sit and wait. You'll see what I saw." They sat without speaking. Around the tower the wind still howled, but not so dolefully as before. The storm was moving over. 5 seconds, 10, and then another flash shot generously across the sky. And they all saw. The vivid sliver of light picked out the lines where cleverly, but not quite cleverly enough, the wallpapered door met the wallpapered wall. Robbo rushed over to give it a push. Nothing. Claudia ran her fingers over the place halfway up the wall where any hidden handle should have been. Nothing again. And Colin said, "Sit back and watch again." Since he'd been right before, everyone obeyed him. They stared through one weakening flash after another, till, just in time, Robbo had the sense to step across and tug Claudia's bed a little further from the wall. As the last faraway burst of light speared through the freshly rinsed panes, each of them finally saw, just where the frame of her bed had hidden it, the strange little telltale pockmark on the wall. "Go on, try it!" The peal of thunder chased its bolt of lightning across the sky as Robbo leaned forward and pressed. The door sprang open. Everybody stared. It was the tangled veil of stretched and broken cobwebs they noticed first. "Nobody's been through this door for years and years." "Who's coming in?" "Not me." "Nor me." But as if Robbo had cast the spell of his own courage on them, they all crept after him into the tiny room. A tower off a tower. Through the 6 delicate vaulted windows, as narrow as the ones that archers used, the storm-washed moonlight poured in pale blue shafts. The dust lay thick on shelf and desk and chair, on lantern and candelabra, on books and cushions, even on the floor, where the brash patterns pressed by the soles of their shoes made them feel even more like trespassers. It was quite obvious to every one of them that no one had stepped in this room as long as anyone alive could possibly remember. Claudia stretched out a finger towards one of the window ledges, where a tiny carved wooden cow balanced forlornly on 3 legs. Just as she stroked its nose, trying to comfort it for all those years and years of loneliness, she heard a soft whirring behind her. "What's that?" Robbo had set a huge varnished globe of the world spinning on its axis. "Robbo, don't!" He put out a hand to stop it. Claudia was right. Like a museum or a church, this was no place for idle fun and games. Ralph gazed at the cobwebs glinting in the moonlight. Whose room was this, I wonder? The heavy drapes, the plain dark coverlet, the framed old maps. Surely even his frail and nodding great-grandmother had spent her childhood in a brighter room than this. All he could tell from looking round was that when it was left to spiders all those years ago, the last child to sleep in that high, ornate bed came from a family with a mint of money. Claudia was peering at the spindly desk. This was a boy's room. How can you tell? Claudia pointed to a dusty green album. As they watched, she leaned forward, and just as if the dull-looking binder on the desk was a delicious birthday cake studded with candles, she took the most enormous breath and blew. Dust flew in clouds, and suddenly all of them could see what up till then only Claudia had noticed in spidery writing on the cover. Richard Clayton Harwick, My Story. Read and weep. "Cripes!" Robbo said, echoing the driver without thinking. But this reminder of the minibus raised in Ralph's mind an explanation other than dying wind for the faint rumble outside. "Is that the bus?" Pixie rushed to the window ledge and peered down. "It's in the courtyard. They're getting their stuff out." Ralph snatched up the album. "Quick," he said. "Pixie and Claudia, upstairs. Try and look fast asleep. Robbo and Colin, into bed, quickly." Robbo stared. "Why?" he demanded. "If Miss Odell thinks we're asleep, she'll leave us here, and I won't get to share with my mates." Pixie turned in the doorway. "He's right. It was bad enough being taken off the bus, but this way I won't even get a bed next to Shrila." Ralph pointed round the little tower room, drowned in moonlight, and lost time. "Listen," he begged. "If we come back to read this tomorrow, everyone else will find out, and Miss Odell will take charge of the album and lock the tower room." He spread his hands. "You know that," he told them. They knew that. Nobody argued. "But we could just pretend to be asleep and read it tonight. Our friends won't be upset. They'll just think Mr. Plumley told us to stick together in the storm, and by tomorrow we'll be back with them." Robbo still looked unconvinced. "But why?" "Why?" Ralph held the album out towards him with both hands. "Robbo, how often do you get a chance like this?" He ran his fingers over the spidery writing. "Richard Clayton Harwick, read and weep," he said softly. "How many people are brave enough to tell you their story?" He was practically begging now. "Robbo, how many chances do you get to peep into someone else's life?" Robbo said nothing, but backing out through the door, he swept his holdall on the nearest bed and started to root for his pyjamas. The girls fled upstairs, and Colin and Ralph pulled the hidden door closed behind them. By the time Miss Odell and Mr. Plumley climbed wearily up the stairs a few minutes later, carrying sandwiches and drinks, all that they saw in the first tower room were 3 dark mounds under the coverlets. "Fancy," said Mr. Plumley. "I'd no idea they were as tight as that." Miss Odell dumped the drink cans on the floor. "Where are the girls?" She tiptoed further up the stairs. Ah, here they are, fast asleep as well. Shouldn't we wake them? The way Miss Odell stared at him, you'd think he'd asked, shouldn't we stab them? Haven't we had enough problems? There might be a bit of a fuss tomorrow if they can't find beds next to their best friends, but after that frightful journey, I'm not waking anyone. Pulling the pile of wrapped sandwiches out of Mr. Plumley's arms, she tipped them on the end of the nearest bed. Anyway, she added cheerfully, these 5 must have something in common. That's why I picked them out. It didn't seem fair that the only ones not to travel on the bus should be the few who hadn't yet barged rudely onto the last seats. So I just looked at my list and picked out the first 5 names with a tick in one of the columns. Which column? Mr. Plumley was interested. It didn't seem to him that little firebrand Pixie had anything in common at all with steady, sensible Claudia, or that quick-witted and hard-working Ralph was in any way similar to Colin, whose habit of drifting through the hours of each school day as if his thoughts were hundreds of miles away drove all his teachers to despair. And as for soccer-mad Robbo, what this sports-crazy boy might share with any of the rest, Mr. Plumley couldn't imagine. Which column? He asked again. But Miss Odell was already halfway down the stairs. Impatiently her answer echoed up, prompting him to scuttle down after her. How should I know? Maybe they're all vegetarians, or allergic to wasp stings, or non-swimmers. I didn't bother to look. But believe me, even if they don't know it yet, these 5 have something in common. And just as the lights came on again all over the house, she shut the tower door, leaving in breath-holding silence 5 ill-assorted eavesdroppers, who, like Mr. Plumley, found that rather hard to believe. As soon as Pixie and Claudia had crept back in the room, Ralph slid the album out from under his pillow. Who's going to read it, then? Before Claudia could suggest something fair, like tossing a coin or taking turns, Pixie had stretched out her hands. Give it to me. I'm brilliant at reading. Ralph rolled his eyes at her as she snatched the album. It can't be modesty we have in common, he teased. Everyone laughed, except Pixie. Pixie just glowered. Or finding the same things funny, added Ralph. Pixie ignored him. She was already opening the book. Shh, she said, settling herself on the nearest spare bed. Are you listening? And since she was brilliant at reading, they soon were. Richard Clayton Harwick, My Story. Read and weep. When I was young, my father took a fever. Day by day, everything changed. A dreadful silence fell upon our house. The maids wept in corners. My mother's dark dresses billowed as she hurried across landings, impatiently snatching from the servants' hands the things she begged my father to lift his head from the pillows and try. Poor things indeed. A sip of water, a slice of peach, the tiniest fragment of dry toast. But it was of no use. Nobody said a word to me. What should they say? Everyone loved him so, they would have fallen into fits of weeping saying it. But early one evening, I came across George, the gardener, leaning heavily on his spade, and took the courage to ask him, Mr. Digby, is my father dying? He lifted his head and stared. Oh, Master Richard, he said, pushing the spade aside and crushing me to his breast. And then I knew. That night, Lucy, the maid, came in my mother's place to hear my prayers and say good night, God bless. The frills round her apron were damp, and even as she sat at my bedside, her thoughts were far from this little tower room, and she kept dabbing at her eyes. Lucy, I asked her, will it be tonight? At once she laid a finger on my lips. Hush, don't even speak of it. Before I could ask her more, she had jumped to her feet and hurried away, weeping. But early next morning, when I had chased the dogs up and down the avenue of limes, till I at least was tired, then hidden myself deep in the shrubbery to be alone with my dark fears, I heard a frantic rustling in the undergrowth, and saw a puffball of white frills pushing its way between bushes, and slapping its dainty hands crossly at all the cold dewdrops flying from the leaves. And there in front of me stood little Charlotte. Dickie, Mamma has set the whole house a-searching. Papa has hugged and kissed me, and now he is asking to see you. I know my duty to my sister, but I confess I left her rescue to the mercy of the under-gardeners. Without a word of thanks to her for her message so hard delivered, I crashed my way out of the shrubbery, sped across the lawns, and took a short-cut through the open French windows. As I leapt over the rugs, A heavy, black-sleeved hand fell on my arm, swinging me round. "Stay, boy." It was the Reverend Coldstone. It was not Sunday, but still I wished him back in his dark, ivy-smothered chapel. "Sir, I am in a hurry." He gripped my arm tighter and loomed over me. His pale face peered in mine. He was dressed black as a bat, and, I'll say it fearlessly now he has done his best to beat fear out of me, he was no more welcome than one of those sinister, misbegotten creatures in my mother's pretty morning-room. "Please, sir, I beg you, my father wishes to see me. I must go." He pinched my elbow. "Are these your best manners?" "Yes, sir," I said sharply, "when I know that my mother has sent for me." Then he stepped back. There was a flash of anger in those ice-blue eyes. And when he spoke, his voice was even sharper than mine, with, I sensed, far more practice. "Trust me," he warned. "I shall take time to mend your manners soon." On any other day, I might have taken time to disbelieve him, but I just ran, up the stairs and over the landing, to where my mother watched for me in the doorway. "Richard," she said to me sternly, brushing the unruly hair back from my forehead, "now you must be brave for me. I will not have your father go trouble to his grave." "Yes, Mamma." "And Richard." I turned back. "Yes, Mamma." She took my hands in hers and squeezed them. "No tears, my dearest. Your poor father has seen enough of tears." "Yes, Mamma." No tears. I would have found obedience easier that morning if I had known how many tears I was to shed after that day, how many nights my pillow would become a flood, how many cloudless afternoons I was to water with my private showers. Show me the child who reaches for the hand of father or mother and says farewell, and I will show you a storm of weeping under a face of stone. "There's my strong lad," he said. "No tears. I am glad to see it." His voice was so weak, so rasping, that I could barely make out his words. "You must be good to your mother and sister. You are the man of the house now. They will depend on you." I bent my head nearer the pillow. He took my hand with a grip so feeble that Charlotte could have squeezed my fingers harder. "Obey your mother's wishes to the letter." "Yes, father." How selfish it would have seemed if I had cried out then, "Mother and Charlotte, yes, but what of me?" Then selfish I must be, for I have sat in this cold and lonely tower room for hour after hour, and the thought has come again and again, but what of me? I wish my mother well, of course I do, and I would not harm Charlotte for the world, nor let another try it. But why did my father forget to mention me? Does my happiness not matter? Do I count for less? Am I supposed to nod and smile and be a brave lad forever, while everything changes around me, and everything I loved is different? No, not just different, I will say it, worse. For things are worse, far worse. Sometimes I sit beside my father's grave and run my fingers over the letters of his name cut deep in stone, and suddenly I fear I will go mad and scramble to my feet and stamp to wake him and tell him all the things that have gone wrong since he was taken from us. Why should he rest in peace while I become practically a stranger in my own house? Guess who makes all rules now? That black bat crept up on my mother while she was busy weeping and trapped her as surely as if he'd thrown a net on her. Now, Mrs. Harwick, you cannot see the holes in the chapel path for tears. Please take my arm. I'll see you safely home. Come, my dear Mrs. Harwick, together we shall pray. Even while Charlotte could still count on her stubby pink fingers the months that had passed since her last fond farewell to her father, Mr. Coldstone was pulling his net tighter. Lilith, your grief lasts longer than the Lord would ask. And only weeks later, hiding my own tears deep in the shrubbery, I overheard the words that turned this heart of mine to stone. Lily, dear, when you are mine, when you are mine. And yes, now you would think he really does own my mother, and everything of hers is his as well. It seems that I am his, and so is Charlotte. That boy runs wild. I have a mind to tame him. He must in any case be sent to school. And then perhaps his sister, free from his influence, will be less giddy herself." And what did my mother say? Did she rise to her feet and flash her eyes and tell him, "Mr. Coldstone, you go too far. My Richard may wander freely around the home and gardens in which he has known happier times, but I'll not have him called wild. And as for little Charlotte, her father and myself were proud to raise a child so fond and loving. We did not call her giddy, and I know he would join with me in being grateful if her new father did not do so either." Is this how my mother defended us? No, it is not. All that my mother did was lower her eyes, or look away, or press her fingers to the throbbing in her temples, and beg Lucy for yet another powder for my poor aching head. As weeks went by, the rules grew stricter and stricter, till there were days when, but for the kindness of Mr. Digby showing me how to whittle wood to little animals, and Lucy spoiling me with stolen buns, I would have thought my own home more of a prison even than that cold corner of hell to which I was sent 4 days after Christmas. Mordanger School. If there's a meaner place on earth, I wish it burnt to ashes. In 4 long years at this Mordanger School, I have learnt nothing except how to freeze and how to starve and how to be bullied and beaten. I have been robbed of all my precious little tokens from home, and in its cold corridors I have learned how to wait for hour after hour for nothing worth the waiting. Truly, I believe that the entire herd of little wooden cows on Charlotte's toy farm owe their existence to all my teacher's gruesome training. After so many cries of "Sit still, boy!" and "Stop that fidgeting!" now, on my short visits home, I cannot sit for a moment with idle fingers. "Here, Charlotte, here's another cow." She took it and blew it hard to watch the sawdust fly, and then she marched it over the brow of the huge glossy globe my stepfather has kindly bought me for my birthday, so he can better torment me with cuffs and blows for not being able to point to China in a moment, or tell him instantly whether the Indian Ocean is larger or smaller than the Pacific Sea. "Charlotte," I begged her, "give over spinning the globe. Its very rumble turns my stomach to knots." Her face went wistful. "Oh, Dickie," she said, "why must you hate him so?" "Perhaps," I said to Charlotte, "you would get closer to an answer if you were to ask him why he so hates me." Charlotte sighed deeply. "Mamma says that everything he does is for your own good, so you will grow up strong and manly and be a son of whom they can be proud." "I'll be no son of his, not ever." Charlotte turned the cow upside down and inspected its tiny hooves. "He has been kind enough to me," she whispered. Now this was brave of Charlotte. In all the time this man has been in our house, she's picked her way between the two of us, like someone stepping on stones over a river with water raging on both sides. While I am near, she takes a care never to slip her hand too willingly in his, or chuckle at his poor jokes, or settle at his feet while he is reading by the fire. But I know well enough, from stepping silently past doorways and moving like a shadow through the house, that when she thinks that I am far away, watching Mr. Digby prune the roses, or helping Lucy shell beans, then she will nestle to his side, and he will stroke her hair and pet her, call her his good dear Charlie, and beg her to run and fetch his pipe or slippers or his London magazine. I could not help myself. I spat the words at Charlotte. "Easy for you to like him. You have forgotten how things used to be. You have forgotten our father." Her little mouth trembled. "Dickie, I have not." "I think you must, if you can stand without a shudder beside the black bat who seeks to take his place." "Dickie," she wailed at me, "Papa is dead and gone. Why should I treat Mr. Coldstone as if he were a murderer, when I know it was not him but a fever that carried Papa away? Just because life has dealt us one hard blow, there is no reason for us to be unhappy for ever. Perhaps you would all live out your fairy tale more happily without the black clouds I bring." The tears sprang to her eyes. "Don't say so, Dickie." "And if it should be true?" She hurled the little cow in my direction. "It isn't true. Say it's not true." I said it wasn't true. I took her hand in mine and dried her tears and begged her pardon. But deep inside, I know that it is true. That without me, the 3 of them would get on well enough. Mother, I think, would find life much more pleasant without my dark looks and scowling face, reminding her each day that I believe she's a traitor to my father's memory. Mr. Coldstone would greet my disappearance with pleasure. And as for Charlotte, she would, I'm sure, learn to live without me as promptly and easily as she has learned to live without our dear father. So here I am, ready to lay down my pen and lift my bag. It seems so strange that in the instant of bending to the floor to pick up a little wooden cow whose leg has snapped, a boy as young as I could make a decision that will change 3 lives. But I have done so. I am leaving home. Pixie broke off her reading and lifted her head. From Colin's bed had come a sharp intake of breath, and Claudia was blowing her nose on a tissue. "Go on," said Ralph impatiently. "Carry on with the story." But Pixie ignored him. "Are you two all right?" Colin pretended that she wasn't speaking to him, but Claudia openly wiped away her tears. "Yes, carry on. It's just—" Pixie gave her a look. "Just what?" "Nothing." Claudia shook her head. "Go on." As Pixie was finding her place again, Robbo spoke up. "I wish my sister could be here to listen to this. She's hated the beard from the day he moved in with us." "The beard?" Pixie wasn't the only one to glance at him curiously, but she was certainly the only one suddenly to turn back to Colin and Claudia. "I see," she said suddenly. She turned on Ralph. "What about you?" she demanded. "Tell us how you fit in." "What do you mean?" Pixie was grinning now. "Come on, Ralph." Just as he'd teased her earlier, she teased him back. "You're supposed to be clever. Isn't it obvious? Colin's been listening for once instead of daydreaming. Claudia's tissue is soaking, and Robbo's sister knows exactly how Richard Harwick feels." She made little beckoning gestures with both hands, like Miss Odell coaxing the answer out of someone in a maths class. Ralph shook his head, mystified. "I'll give you another clue." Pixie's eyes were bright. "I had to put 2 home addresses on my permission form." Again she imitated Miss Odell. "Just think it through, step by step." She grinned. "Step by wicked step, maybe." "Of course!" Ralph brought his fist down triumphantly on the bed. "It's just that I didn't think, because none of my stepmothers have ever been wicked." "None of them?" Everybody stared, but Ralph didn't even notice. He kept on. "But yes, you're right. I did write 2 addresses on the form." Now it was Claudia's turn to be confused. "Which form?" "The permission form," Ralph told her. "I bet Pixie is right. I bet what we have in common is that we all wrote down a second home address." "And that's the column Miss Odell was looking at when she read out our names to take us off the bus." "That's right." Now Claudia pointed to the album in Pixie's hand. "Does that mean we all have something in common with him as well?" Ralph shuddered. "Oh, no," he said. "We all have 2 homes. Richard Harwick only had 1. Pixie flicked over the page. "I'm not sure he even keeps that one very much longer." Ralph reached for his drink. "Go on," he ordered Pixie. "Carry on reading." "Yes," Colin said. "Go on, and just be sure you don't miss out a single word." Turning to find his sandwich, he missed the looks of sheer astonishment that came his way. Pixie picked up the album. Over the page, the writing became much tidier and easier to read. If even stare round the room, pay no attention Colin was so taken up with the story he was determined to hear the end, she'd carry on. I shall not tire my reader with the details of my flight. Enough to tell you that it is easy to trade a brand new school suit for old rags, and orphans are 2 a penny down at the docks. When a great ship strains at the tide and needs a cabin boy, nobody asks the lad who speaks as roughly as a gardener's son and claims to be Dick Digby whether his mother knows he is off to sea. And for the first time in my life, I wished I'd paid more attention to my lessons. If I'd had my stepfather's globe more firmly in my mind back then, I might be better able now to chart for you the oceans I sailed across, the seas I saw, and our strange ports of call. Twice in the next few years of dazzling sunrises and haunting sunsets, our ship came home. And twice, instead of doing my duty as a son and brother, and marching up the drive to face my stepfather's wrath, my mother's tears, and all my sister's kisses, I stood like a trespasser in the shadow of the lime walk and watched the house. House? Did I call it house? It was more like a tomb. For as I watched, it seemed to me that all the light and life of my old home had drained from its very stones. Of my mother and sister there was no sign at all, not even the shadow of a dress billowing in front of a window. And in this silent mausoleum, where now my stepfather would be at home, the perfect resting place for a black bat, there was no glimpse of him. Lucy I saw, but she was hurrying across the courtyard, huddled and weeping against the wind. And knowing from early childhood her firm belief in ghosts, I dared not step out from the shadow of the trees for fear of frightening her halfway to death. And Digby, too. A dozen times he stopped his digging and turned my way. The look on his face was hopeful, disbelieving. But peering more closely at the dark dell in which I stood, he shook his grizzled head, as if to tell himself he was a foolish old man dreaming of better times, and lowered his shoulders to his work. That was the last time I saw old Harwick Hall before this very night. I crept away back to sea, where fortune shone on me even through storms and shipwrecks. Seaman, midshipman, captain, I rose as swiftly as if I swarmed a rope, and it was idly sitting at my captain's table that my eye fell on the small square of print that brought me home. We seek news of Richard Clayton Harwick of Old Harwick Hall, who is to write to Riddle and Fluke, solicitors, to learn something to his advantage. To my advantage? Shame on Riddle and Fluke. Only such men of dust could think the deaths of 3 unhappy souls to my advantage. Oh yes, now I am owner of Old Harwick Hall. All of these lands are mine, and I'm rich. And what's the good of that? My mother died of heartbreak, my stepfather of fury when he first realized that no trick of his could keep the house from me. And as for my dearest Charlotte, read, if your tears will let you, this copy of the letter I found waiting for me in my tower room. My dearest, dearest Richard, for you are still dearest to me, though you have been so cruel. Better if you had found the courage to stay and show patience and take your part in our troubles, not heap on more by vanishing. Things have been hard with all of us since you left. First Mother spent a fortune seeking you, and all of us suffered Mr. Coldstone's anger as money slipped steadily away. What? Yet another costly search? Let the ungrateful boy be lost forever. Lilith, waste more of your dwindling fortune on this folly, and I will make you pay for it twice over. And so he did. Last year she died, of him too close and you too far. And from the day that she was buried, he would not give a penny to look for you. Why hunt for such a knave? It fell to me to keep the search alive. I have no money of my own. And so last year, upon my 16th birthday, I married Charles de Vere. I do not love him as I know I should, and he cannot make me happy. But he is prosperous, and he has promised to keep up the search. Riddle and Fluke, his solicitors, daily put notices in every paper. Oh, Richard, sometimes I think not to have seen them you must have fled halfway across the globe, to Alexandria or Chittagong. And perhaps you will never see them, or this sad letter. But if you do, take a moment to weep, for this will be the first and only letter you will receive from your loving sister Charlotte. If I should live, I'd not allow a shadow on your homecoming. But if I die in fever of childbirth, as so many do, then Charles will send this letter to our old home to tell you why you return to cold, cold silence. Fare you well, brother. Your devoted. You cannot read her name for tears. First hers, then mine. Oh, how I wept last night. And now, as morning breaks, I have to choose whether to stay and face the damage I have done by piling one wrong on another till all I loved was broken from the strain, or whether to pick up my bags and disappear again, shutting this tower room forever behind me and leaving it to the spiders in their webs to quarrel whether I was right or wrong. I spin the globe, and memories of Charlotte fill the room. Daylight creeps over the sill where the small broken cow stands so forlornly. Will I go or stay?
Go on.
Pixie laid down the album.
I can't.
That's it.
That's it?
Yes, that's where it stops.
Stops dead? Just like that?
Just like that. She raised the album to show them. They sat in silence until Robbo said, "He must have gone then."
Picked up his bags and slipped away, agreed Claudia. How awful. Not just for him, Pixie reminded her sharply. What about Lucy and Mr. Digby? What do you think happened to them?
Once again, Colin astonished them by speaking up.
I expect, like his mother and sister, they just had to keep waiting and hoping, he said. And I can tell you, it isn't very nice, just having to keep waiting and hoping.
He spoke with such a depth of feeling that it was obvious he'd had to do too much of both himself.
It seems to me, said Pixie fiercely after a moment, that no one should make decisions that will change the lives of everyone round them without thinking about it for a very long time.
I did once, Claudia said. I made a decision in the time it took to blink.
I bet it didn't change everything round you, Claudia said thoughtfully. Not quite as much as if I'd run away to sea, but it certainly did change things.
Ralph stretched above his head and flicked off the light switch. Shadows filled the room.
Stories don't have to be written, he reminded Claudia. This is the night for stories. Off you go.
Claudia's story. Green Pyjamas.
Not long ago, my mum and dad split up. I didn't see it coming. I knew that they quarrelled a lot. You couldn't miss it. But I didn't think it was anything special. I'd put on my headphones or turn up the sound on the television, and they always seemed to make up again pretty quickly. One day my mum would be moaning about my dad. I'm fed up with the way he spends all his time running that cafe. We hardly ever see him, and when we do, he's too tired to be pleasant. But the next day, if I said anything, she'd take a fit. Don't talk about Daddy like that, please. And then, one day, he was gone. I came home from school, and everything in the house was moved round. My bedroom radio was in the kitchen. My jackets and shoes were spread out more neatly in the downstairs cupboard, because all his coats and boots had disappeared. The frog mug I gave him for his birthday wasn't on its hook, and some of the photos round the house were gone, just ones of me and him. What's going on? Nothing, Mum said. It's just that your father and I aren't getting on very well at the moment, so he's gone to Granny's house while we calm down. She tried to sound cheerful about it, but I knew it was worse than she was letting on. Usually he calms down working at the cafe, and she calms down on the phone to her sister. No one had ever gone to calm down at Granny's before, and no one had ever taken a radio and wellies and photos. He came back quite a lot at first, not to stay, just for tea and more arguments. I'm not completely stupid. Sometimes I listen behind doors, and sometimes I switch my headphones up so loudly that they leaked, but didn't put them in my ears properly, so Mum and Dad didn't realise I was eavesdropping as I walked past them and up the stairs to my bedroom. And sometimes I asked the two of them, "What's going on?" "Nothing," they kept saying. "Don't worry. It will all be sorted out." Then suddenly, everything changed. There was a flood of phone calls late one night, and Mum was in a rage, and even Granny, who'd been very busy not taking sides, had a huge row with Dad. And that was the first time I heard the name Stella. Mum spat it down the phone to her sister so hard that I had to write it on a sheet of paper in curly felt pen letters and stare at it before it turned back from a swear word to a name again. And after that, my dad hardly dared come near the house. I think he thought Mum might kill him. Sometimes he phoned to get to talk to me, and from the freezing way Mum went silent the moment she heard his voice and held the phone away from her as if it were a bad smell, I'd know it was him. To try and stop her looking like that, I'd rush across so fast I'd trip on the rug or tip over a milk bottle or something stupid and feel embarrassed when I spoke to him. "Hello?" "Hello." "Good day at school?" "All right." "Anything happen?" "Not really." "What, nothing?" I'd look over my shoulder. Mum would be busy wiping up the milk I'd spilled or clattering dishes as if she wasn't listening, but I knew she was. Want to come over on Saturday?
If you like.
No, he'd say, getting irritated. If you'd like.
I'd glance at Mum, who was still listening.
All right, then.
I'd try not to sound too keen, so as not to upset Mum. And after I'd put the phone down, I'd realise I wasn't that keen anyway. If I went over to Granny's to visit Dad, I'd miss Natasha's party, or going to the shops with Shrila, or working on my project with Flora. And Granny's house was boring. No more boring than usual, but boring all the same. There isn't much to do. None of my stuff is there. And Dad just seemed to sink in his armchair, even more bored than me, and ask impossible questions.
Are you all right, then?
Or, how's Mum?
What was I supposed to answer? They're always on at you to tell the truth, but what was I supposed to say? No, I am not all right. I hate this, and it's stupid. I don't care how much you and Mum quarrel. I don't even care about this mysterious Stella nobody will talk about. I just want things back the way they used to be, with you home first every Wednesday, and all the fuss about what time I had to go to bed, and you forever complaining about me not turning the hot tap off properly, and telling me to take more care over my homework. I want you back, picking the bits of mushroom off your pizza and dropping them onto my plate as if they were slices of fried slug. We had pizza yesterday, Mum and me, and suddenly I missed you so much that I started crying, and Mum said, "Oh, please don't start, I can't bear it." And I threw my slice of pizza on the floor and slammed upstairs and locked my door on her. And then there was Mum on one side of the door and me the other, both of us howling our eyes out because of you. So don't ask me, are you all right then, and how's Mum, or I might answer you. Don't even ask.
Claudia broke off. Outside, the wind still whistled through the trees, but in the room, the silence was palpable. Nobody even breathed.
Are you still listening?
Ralph's voice came out of the darkness.
Don't be so silly, Claudia. Of course we're listening. Just carry on.
Dad stayed at Granny's house till after Christmas. It was the first time we'd ever had a separate Christmas, and it was horrid. I had to choose between not having my presents from Dad on the right day or not opening them in front of him. He said he didn't mind, but it was obvious he really did. And then on Boxing Day, I had to go to Granny's, and that was horrid too. Mum and Dad were icily polite to one another when I was dropped off, and Granny had insisted on saving the big meal for when we were all together. But I was already sick of turkey and Christmas pudding and cake, so I felt terrible, and so did they. And it was that night that I met Daddy's Stella. She wasn't in the least what I expected. Up till the moment he pointed her out, walking down the street on the other side, I hadn't realised I had a picture of her in my brain at all. But when I saw her, sort of plain and mousy and dressed in a long brown coat, I realised that I'd been thinking all along that she was tall and blonde and glittery, with fluttering eyelashes and painted eyes. To be quite honest, I think my mum's a whole lot better looking than Stella, especially when she's dressed to go out. But Stella was smiling and friendly, and she came over at once and said, "Hello, you must be Claudia," and started asking all that stuff about whether I'd had a nice Christmas and what presents I'd been given and how much longer I had off school. "Were you going anywhere special? Come for a walk with us," Dad said to her in a stagey, false way that made it obvious they'd fixed this whole little accidental meeting up between them. They'd probably even synchronised watches. And I was furious, because I hate being treated as if I'm an idiot and can't work out what's going on behind my back. So I said nothing and stared down at my feet. And I stopped answering her questions since I was so annoyed. Dad walked one side of me and she walked the other, though I expect they'd have preferred to be arm in arm. And she kept talking brightly while I marched along as fast as I could to make it clear I wanted the whole business over as soon as possible. I had to listen a bit so I could answer yes or no whenever she asked me a question, but most of the time I kept my head down and my eyes half closed to make the frost on the pavement glitter and dance. And in the end, Stella gave up. "I ought to be getting back now." "Goodbye," I said, which was extremely rude, because as far as I could make out, we were miles from anywhere. Dad gave me a little dig in the ribs to remind me of my manners, and I gave him a really vicious poke back and muttered something under my breath. "What did you say?" But when he saw my face, he knew better than to make me repeat it. Well, not in front of Stella, anyway. And she was bright red now, and just staring bravely ahead of her. She walked even faster than I did after that, and practically ran up the steps to her front door. Then she turned back to face us.
"Good night, Claudia," she said. That's all. And I knew then that she'd be seeing him later to say good night. Either he'd fib to Granny and say he had to go back and check on things at the cafe, or he'd make some excuse to go out for a while after I was asleep. And I felt cheated, because I'd only been persuaded to come to Granny's house because of him, and somehow, if he was slipping off to see Stella later, it made me sort of second best and not important, as if I really didn't matter much, and might just as well have stayed home with Mum, where both of us would have been happier. And I hated him for it. I wouldn't speak to him all the way back. When Granny asked us, "Did you have a nice walk?" I burst out, "He did, I didn't," and stormed off to bed. I thought Granny might come up to tuck me in and tell me not to fret. Everything would come out in the wash, and she bet I couldn't even remember what I was worrying about last year, and all the other things she used to say to cheer me up when I was younger. But she preferred to stay downstairs and have a row with Dad about his ruining my visit to their house with his impatience and sneakily dragging me off to meet that woman behind her back. And if he couldn't be trusted, she told him, maybe he'd better start looking for somewhere else to stay till things were sorted out. "I suppose you'd like me to go back," he shouted. "Well, maybe you haven't grasped this yet, but her mother doesn't want me." That made me so furious I pulled my fingers out of my ears, scrambled out of bed, and rushed to the top of the stairs. "Don't call her that!" I yelled. Dad came out in the hall and stared up at me. "Call her what?" "That!" I banged the door so hard the wardrobe shook. I hate it when they say that. Your father, her mother, your daughter. As if just because we're all separated, we don't even remember one another's names any longer. Next day, my dad moved out of Granny's house, straight in with Stella. Mum was as shocked as I was when she heard. But he made a point of telling her, next time he came to fetch me, that he had nowhere else to go. With the cafe doing so badly, how could he afford to pay rent while he was still coughing up for us in our house? "Maybe the cafe would do a bit better if you spent more time there." "That's right," he jeered at Mum. "Have it both ways. For years I'm there too much. Then when it suits you, I'm not there enough." Mum opened the door and stood in silence, waiting for him to leave. "Right then," he said. "I'll stop round for the rest of my things tomorrow." "Just tell me when," said Mum, "so I can make sure I'll be safely out." And that's how we went on for quite a while, with them hardly speaking to one another, and taking turns to come to things at school, and giving me frosty little notes to pass on about things like missing socks and library books. Stella stayed out of it as much as she could. On Wednesdays, when I came for tea with Dad, she used to work late, and on weekends, if I was there, she spent hours reading in the bedroom, and the rest of the time keeping busy in the kitchen. She only sat with us during the meals. And those were awful. I don't mean the food. That was quite brilliant. Dad doesn't run a cafe for nothing, and Stella's a good cook. I mean the conversation. Stella would try. "How's everything at school?" "Fine," I'd say coldly. "Who's your best friend?" "Shreela," I'd say just as coldly. And then I'd add, "But I don't get to see her so much anymore, now that I have to come here." Then Stella would go quiet and push a forkful of food around her plate. "How's Natasha?" my dad would ask. "She's all right," I'd tell him. "She's going on holiday soon, with her mother and father." I wouldn't say it, but still you'd hear it ringing round the room. Lucky Natasha. "What about Flora?" "She's very well, thank you." Stella would try again. "I don't know Flora, do I?" And I'd just stare down at my plate, with a look on my face that said, plain as day, "Why should you? You're nothing to do with me. You're not my mother. Why should you know anything at all about my friends?" If I wanted the butter, I'd ask Dad to pass it, even if Stella was closer. And whenever she asked me a question, I'd try to answer it without even looking at her, as if I just happened to be speaking to the air that just happened to be floating invisibly around me. And all the time, I would be thinking of Mum. That was the problem. I couldn't bear to sit there having a perfectly normal time with Dad and Stella, while Mum was at home frantically cleaning out the gerbils, or rinsing the glass wall light shades under the taps, or hosing mud off the steps. I'd never known our house so clean and tidy and organised as the months after Mum and Dad split up. Each time I came home, something else had been painted or mended or polished. Mum would look up at me as I walked in, But she waited till the sound of Dad's car had faded round the corner before she asked, "Have a nice time?" And it was important to be able to say, "No, not really. It was boring." I can't explain why that helped Mum, or me, but it just did. I felt if I'd got on with Stella, if I'd just chatted to her while she fixed her silver necklace, or helped her choose bulbs out of the catalogue for her lovely window boxes, or worn the beautiful green pyjamas she bought me as a late Christmas present, then things would somehow have been worse for Mum, even if she wasn't there to see us or hear us. I felt when I came home and Mum asked, "Have a nice time?" if I'd said, "Yes, I enjoyed it," I'd have been doing exactly the same as Dad. I'd have been cheating on her. I'd be as much to blame as him for all the horrid changes I never wanted. I couldn't blame Stella, though. I did at first. I hated her at first. I thought if Stella hadn't come along, Dad would have stayed with us. But it was Shrila who put me right on that. "He could go home whenever he wanted," she told me. "My dad stormed out once. Then he just came back. I heard him telling Granny that Mum doesn't want him." Shrila shrugged. "We had a bust-up once," she reminded me, "and we're best friends again." I thought about that for ages. I couldn't remember what the quarrel was about. Something to do with partners for dancing. But after our big fight, I wouldn't make up with Shrila and she wouldn't make up with me. She went off with Flora and I went off with Natasha. I can't remember how we ended up being good friends again. But I remember all those days of not speaking to one another and looking away in class and picking different people on our teams and acting as if neither of us cared in the slightest. But we were 7. Mum is 34 and Dad is 36. 37 on the night of the party meal. The night when in less time than it takes to blink, I made my big decision. From the moment I arrived, I could tell there was something special happening. For one thing, my dad was astonished to see me. "I thought you weren't coming this weekend." "Mum had to change it round. Granny mixed up the dates for her appointment at the hospital. We left a message at the cafe." "Oh, right." He looked a bit guilty, as if he hadn't been near the cafe all day, and it was true. The two of them had spent the whole morning shopping, and now the kitchen was piled high with groceries, and they were frantically chopping and stirring and mixing and blending. I helped for a while, till I'd had enough titbits to count as lunch. But then I went into the other room to do some of my homework. It was quite obvious that they'd be cooking all the afternoon. After an hour or so, Stella came in and started cleaning while I pretended that I hadn't noticed her. She did a proper job, moving the furniture and wiping and polishing until the place sparkled. From time to time she said something in my direction, but I either grunted as if I were very busy with my work, or acted as if I hadn't heard over the sounds of clattering from the kitchen. Then Stella went to fetch the knives and forks and sorted them out on the table. I watched her carefully from behind my hair. As far as I could make out, she was setting for 7. "Shall I tell you who's coming?" she said to me. I shrugged as if I couldn't care at all and wasn't really listening. You could see her struggling to get the names right. "There's Barney and Mary, and George, and someone called Linda who sometimes works in the cafe. Dad's friends." And just at that moment, he came in the room. I didn't dare keep up the big freeze with Stella, so I said, "That's only 6, and you're setting for 7. She stopped and looked at me. "Don't forget yourself." "But you weren't expecting me?" "No," she agreed cheerfully. "But now you're here, the more the merrier." I wondered if she'd checked this out with Dad. Left to himself, I knew he would have packed me off to the bedroom with supper on a tray. So I said stubbornly, "I think I prefer to have mine upstairs, by myself." She stopped shunting forks round the table. "Would you? Would you really?" "Yes," I said firmly, and it was true. "Tucked up in bed in your nightie?" I nodded, feeling a bit bad because I hadn't realised that she'd noticed I never wore the green pyjamas that she'd given me. "If that's all right with Dad," I said, as if it was really nothing much to do with her. "It's fine with me," he said, and you could tell he was relieved. I suppose you don't invite your old friends round to supper to meet your new girlfriend and want your daughter at the end of the table, staring at the two of you whenever you talk about how you met and how things are going and what your plans are for the future.
He loaded my tray with all the things I like and gave me a giant helping of pudding, and I went off to bed. "Comfy?" asked Stella, tucking me in as if I were a baby and setting the tray across my knees. I nodded, tugging the sheet up over my nightie like a giant napkin. The doorbell rang. "Wish me luck," she said, and I realised for the first time that she was nervous. She knew as well as I did that all Dad's friends would be watching her closely, wondering if they would get to like her, trying to work out why Dad had left home for her, and if she'd be a wicked stepmother to me. I couldn't wish her luck. How could I? If she was lucky, it made it harder for my dad ever to come back home. So I just pretended that I'd choked on a baby tomato and couldn't speak. She knew I was faking, but she didn't push it. "Come down if you want anything," she told me. "Anything at all." And off she went, like someone walking bravely to the scaffold. The bell rang again, and then again. And while I listened to Dad's friends coming in and following him to the kitchen for their drinks and getting settled, I suddenly had an idea. I'd hide behind the giant fern on the landing and eavesdrop through the meal. Then I'd hear everything. With 4 people sitting asking polite questions like, "What are your plans now?" and "Will you be moving house?" and "Are you hoping to marry?" I'd find out everything I wanted to know and hadn't dared to ask. For weeks and weeks I'd had the feeling things were just happening to me. Other people decided things and made them happen, and I was part of them, but I wasn't told anything about it till after. And I was sick of it. It seemed to me that if I could find out about everyone's plans, I'd be a whole lot safer. I ate every single mouthful on my tray. Then I slipped out of bed and took the green pyjamas out of the packet. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. The exact shade of green. And off I went, crawling so quietly that no one downstairs heard, along to the giant fern. And there I sat, listening to every word. And there were enough of them. Words, I mean. The meal went on and on. They talked about everything. Cars, traffic, weather. If it was boring, then they talked about it. But all the way through, nobody said a word about Mum, or Dad, or me, or Stella. I realised they were taking special care not to say anything that might lead to trouble. On it went. Boring, boring, boring. Insurance, house prices, Greek holidays. I almost would have fallen asleep. Except I noticed something. No one was talking to Stella. They weren't turning their backs on her exactly, but they weren't talking to her. Like me, they talked to Dad or to the air. The time went by, and no one spoke about the lovely food in case they had to thank Stella. No one admired the beautiful table in case Stella had set out all the sparkling things. Nobody asked about her job or her family or what she thought. They were, I realised, being as loyal to my mum as they could be. They couldn't make friends with Stella. They just ignored her. They were just like me. And I couldn't help it. I felt sorry for her. She'd worked so hard. I'd watched. She'd worked all day to make things nice for them, and they were treating her as if she were some kind of ghost. They smiled at her vaguely when they had to, and answered her questions politely, and passed her the butter. But deep at heart, they were ignoring her. And it was rude. Plain rude. This may sound strange, but it was only sitting up there on the landing that I could see how very rude it was, and that it wasn't even helping Mum. Mum wasn't there to see it. And anyway, what had gone wrong was nothing to do with Mary and Barney, or George, or Linda. It was between my mum and Dad. And treating Stella as if she were invisible was never going to solve it. Shrila and I didn't blame Flora and Natasha when we split up. We just blamed one another. That was fair. And that was the moment when I made my huge decision. I came out from behind the fern and stood in my pyjamas at the top of the stairs where everyone could see me, a giant walking houseplant. Then I sailed down. "What ho?" said Dad. "Come to say hello?" But I ignored him. I went up to Stella. She swiveled on her chair to face me. I looked her in the eye. I used her name. "Stella," I said, "these are the pyjamas you bought me. Aren't they beautiful?" I swirled round and made for the stairs again. On the bottom one, I stopped.
They're brilliant, I told her. Thank you. I ran upstairs. I didn't bother to eavesdrop more than a few minutes longer. I felt full of food and sleepy, and somehow I'd stopped worrying quite so much about what people might say while I wasn't listening. As Granny always says, I shouldn't fret. Everything will come out in the wash, and I can't even remember what I was worrying about last year. I just stayed long enough to make sure everyone had got the point, and sure enough, they had. Mary immediately turned to Stella and asked her where she'd found such lovely pyjamas, and George said it was terribly clever of Stella to get exactly the right size. It wasn't much, maybe, but it was a start. And then, of course, they just got on to shops, boring in spades. So I went off to bed. But in those last couple of minutes, Stella had rumbled where I was and glanced up twice. And twice she winked at me, and I winked back. It wasn't that much, but it was a start. Pixie was first to speak. "You should have brought them with you," she said. "The green pyjamas." "I grew out of them," said Claudia. "I grew out of them at least a year ago." "Your granny was quite wrong then," Ralph couldn't help pointing out. "You can remember what you were worrying about last year." Claudia ignored him. "I cut them into little squares, and now they're part of my new bed cover," she told Pixie. "Stella's been teaching me how to quilt. She showed me lots of things, how to read maps and change electric plugs, and how to skate and—" Colin raised his head. "Where do you skate?" he asked her. Claudia stared at him. "The same place as you." Colin looked mystified. "How do you know?" "I've seen you," said Claudia. "I see you there almost every time I go. But you skate earlier, because by the time I arrive, you're always just sitting on one of the benches. Are you a good skater?" Robbo asked Colin, curious. Colin went scarlet. "Not really," he mumbled. "You ought to be brilliant," said Claudia. "You're always there. Can you do backward jumps?" "Not very well." He was still looking horribly embarrassed. "Can you do butterfly halves?" Ralph asked him suddenly, staring intently. Robbo leaned forward. "Ralph, there's—" But Ralph cut him off. "Let Colin answer." So Colin answered. "No, not very well." "I'm not surprised," said Robbo. "There's no such thing." Colin's flush deepened, and he turned on Ralph. "That wasn't very nice, tricking me." "What I don't understand," said Ralph, "is why you bother to go to the rink all the time, if you don't even skate." Pixie said merrily, "Is it a story? If it's a story, then you have to tell." "Yes," Claudia insisted. "I told my story, now it's time for yours." "It isn't a story," said Colin. But they were all sitting cross-legged on their beds, staring at him as if it were. So, cornered, he began to tell. Colin's story, The Bluebird of Happiness. His face looked peakier than usual in the moonlight. "I never knew my real father," he told them. "Mum left him a few weeks after I was born. She says he was a bit of a roughhouse, and we were much safer away from him, so I'm not sorry about that." He stretched out his fingers on the counterpane, where they gleamed palely like short little rivulets of spilled milk. "Then she took up with my dad. I call him that because he came when I was 8 months old, and I don't remember any time before that. He looks a bit like me anyway. His hair is dark like mine, though he has silver patches over his ears. He knows the words of practically every song you've ever heard, and he rolls his own cigarettes out of tobacco in a tin, and he can't sit on a park bench without every dog in the world coming up to say hello to him. Sometimes they even try to follow him home." He turned his thin face towards the flat silver light pouring through the turret window. "I call him Dad, but he has about 1 billion names for me. Col, Collie, Sonny Boy, Buster, Mr. Bluebird." "Why Mr. Bluebird?" Ralph asked. "I don't know." "Haven't you ever asked him?" "No." "Shh!" Claudia scolded Ralph. "My granny says the child who is loved has many names. Let Colin get on with his story." "It isn't a story," said Colin. "There isn't anything to tell. We just went on. My mum worked in a shop, so it was Dad who walked me to school and back. He got my tea and took me to the park. I used to swing as high as the bar, then lean over so far backwards that when I swung down again, my hair brushed the wood chips, and all the clouds rolled underneath my feet. "Who do you think you are?" he used to tease me. "The bluebird of happiness?" And then he'd roll one last cigarette, and we'd set off for home, shooing the dogs off behind us as we went. Colin fell silent. Everyone gave him a moment. Then Claudia said, "And then?" "And then," Colin said, "my mum and I did a flit." "A what?" "A flit," said Colin. "We moved away." "Why?" "I don't know. She never really explained. If I went on at her, she'd talk about Dad never bothering to get a proper job, and there being more to life than sitting round singing and smoking roll-ups. But that was only afterwards. She didn't say a word before. She just waited for the one day a month when Dad used to go and spend the day with his sister, and then these two friends of hers came round with a van and took almost all the furniture and all my clothes and toys, and we went off. I didn't even realise Dad wasn't coming with us. I saw Mum piling his clothes and tapes and stuff into the middle of one of the empty rooms, and still it never struck me. I was so sure he'd be along later that I picked up a tobacco tin that had rolled away into a corner and stuffed it in my pocket. And later, in the van, I asked my mum, "Who's going to have the flat after us?" And one of the men helping us snorted and said, "Well, not Jack anyway, unless he finds himself a job pretty sharpish." And Mum said shush to him and gave him a funny little sideways look. Then the van swung round the next bend, and I saw this huge sign saying, "Motorway North," and suddenly I felt sick. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere nice," Mum said. But she was wrong. It wasn't nice for me. For one thing, I had to start at another school, where everyone had friends already. Nobody bothered with me, except to snigger when I didn't understand all the stuff they'd been doing. Then Mum found a job in a canteen, and when she came home she was always too busy doing things like making toast and finding clothes for the next day to listen to anything I said about school, and too tired to talk about much herself, except how the noise in the canteen had given her a headache, and how much her legs ached from being on her feet all day. It wasn't how it used to be with Dad. The thing about Dad is, you can talk to him, and he remembers what you say. He'd know the names of all my friends, and if I'd quarrelled with them. He knew my favourite animals, and what I'd call my dog if I had one. He knew which teachers I liked, and which I didn't, and what size batteries went in my favourite games, and what I worried about sometimes late at night, and which jokes he couldn't tell me because he had heard them from me in the first place. "He sounds really nice," Pixie said dreamily. "He is really nice," said Colin. "He's my dad." "Stepdad, really," Ralph couldn't help correcting him. "Dad," Colin said stubbornly. "Go on with your story, Colin," said Claudia. There was a hint of warning in her voice, but it was clear to everyone that this was meant for Ralph, not for Colin. "There isn't a story," said Colin. "I just kept on at her. When's Dad coming? When will he be here? Will he be here for my birthday?" And she always came out with the same old things. "Soon. When he's ready. When he can." But I knew there was something wrong, because she said other things too. "It was all right for you," she kept telling me. "You only saw his good side. You didn't know the half of it." Things like that. Then she'd go on about him never having a proper job, and if I stuck up for him, she'd just get crosser and crosser, so I shut up. His black eyes glittered as he turned his face away. "And I was stupid," he said. "Really stupid. It took me ages to realise he wasn't following, and ages more to work out why. He couldn't. Mum hadn't left him any clues." But one day, I padded in the kitchen in my socks and heard her on the phone. "Just keep your beak buttoned," she was telling someone. Then she looked up and saw me, and I knew. He turned back, his dark hair glimmering silver in the moonlight. And then I realised it was up to me. "What did you do?" asked Pixie. "I wrote a letter." He paused, inspecting his fingers on the coverlet. "It must have been dreadful. My writing's bad enough now, but it was even worse back then. And there was no one I could ask for help, because it had to be secret. I didn't dare tell Mum in case she was furious with you," Pixie suggested. But it was Claudia who guessed. "No," she corrected Pixie, "in case she offered to post it and then threw it away." Colin busied himself with a loose thread on his pyjama sleeve. "It didn't matter anyway," he said defensively. There was no answer. He must have left the flat ages before. Maybe it was empty, and the letter just lay on the doormat. Or maybe the family who moved in after us just weren't the sort to bother with other people's letters. "Listen," said Robbo, "he can't just have disappeared. He was your dad." "Stepdad," Ralph repeated. "Dad," Colin corrected him again. "And you don't understand. It wasn't him who disappeared. It was us." "But surely when your mum realised how upset—" Robbo broke off. Colin was glaring at him. "Listen," he said, "she didn't mean it to turn out like this. It's just that, because she'd had to run away before to stay safe, she thought it was better that way." He turned back to the window and stared out across the moon-bleached lawns. "And I did try to explain. I tried a lot. But in the end she'd just get cross with me. She couldn't help it. 'Well, he's not with us any more,' she'd say. 'So that's that. And one day you'll understand it's for the best.'" Pixie was scornful. "His best, maybe, not yours." But Colin just carried on staring out into the night, as though pretending that he hadn't heard. Pixie persisted. "I mean, to pack him off in a puff of smoke like that. Your own dad." "Stepdad," corrected Ralph for the third time. And when Colin failed to turn round and argue, he went a little further. "Not even stepdad, really, unless they were married, or he'd gone to the trouble of adopting you." Still, Colin kept his back turned. "What I don't understand," Pixie said stubbornly, "is why just because his mother had finished with Colin's dad, Colin had to finish with him too." Colin spun round. "I never finished with him. It wasn't like that. You don't know." "You said—" Claudia gave Pixie's bedrail a sharp tap. "Shh," she said sternly. "Just let Colin explain. Let him get on with his story." "There isn't a story," said Colin. "We just went on." He glared at Pixie. "But I hadn't finished with him. He stopped. "What I did—" He spread his hands, stared down at them, and tried again. "I didn't finish with him. I pretended. Each night I took the tobacco tin out of the toe of my boot where I kept it hidden and put it under my pillow. Then, very softly, so Mum wouldn't hear, I'd hum our favourite song. And when I was ready, I unscrewed the lid. There were only a few old shreds of tobacco in there, but still—" Again he stopped and glanced around at them. They were all staring back. Claudia was even biting her lip. No one was laughing at him. So bravely he went on. "But still, it smelled the same. It was like burying your head in his woolly, or squashing up in the chair to watch telly. And I'd pretend that he was there with me, and I could talk to him just like before." He took a deep breath. "I stayed awake for hours and hours and hours, talking to him, although he wasn't there." Pale silver tears spilled from his eyes and splashed on the coverlet. "I pretend like that sometimes," Claudia comforted him. "Everyone does," Ralph said impatiently. "Get on with the story, Colin." But Colin had been distracted. "Do they?" He brushed the tears from his cheeks and turned to Pixie. "Do they? Do you?" "Of course I do," Pixie told him. "Ralph's right. Everyone does it." Colin turned to Robbo. "What about you? Do you do it?" Robbo was clearly deeply embarrassed. "Not with my dad." "But you do it." Robbo hesitated. "Of course he does it," Ralph said irritably. "Stop wasting time, Colin. Just get on with the story." "I've told you," said Colin. "There isn't any story. It's just that, as we went on, I started getting into trouble at school from being half asleep. I was sent to see someone because I was doing so badly. But she said there was nothing at all wrong with my brains, and someone else would have to deal with me. So this man came round and talked to Mum. And Mum agreed that I was a bit upset at first after the move, but I'd soon got over it." "Oh, yes," scoffed Pixie. "Settled down in no time," Ralph echoed scornfully. "Almost forgotten how things were before," Robbo muttered in turn. "Perfectly happy now," sighed Claudia. "I'm sure she didn't mean to tell lies," Colin defended his mother. "It's just that what she said wasn't the truth. This man sat there through 3 cups of coffee, and Mum didn't even tell him about Dad. Once, when he asked, she just pretended that he meant the other one. 'Oh,' she said, 'Colin hasn't seen his father since he was a baby.' I was standing there listening, and that's what she said." "And what did you say?" asked Robbo. Colin shifted uneasily. "It was difficult," he told them. "You see, the thing about my mum—" He took a deep breath and tried again. Don't get me wrong, I love her and everything. It's just that sometimes I get the feeling that Mum thinks the things that are happening to both of us are only really happening to her. As if how I feel doesn't matter quite so much. Pixie reached under her pillow and drew out the album. Holding it up to catch the shaft of pale light pouring over the window ledge, she rustled backwards through the pages. "But what of me?" she read aloud again. "I wish my mother well, of course I do. But does my happiness not matter? Do I count for less? Am I supposed to nod and smile and be a brave lad forever, while everything changes round me and everything I loved is different? No, not just different. I will say it." But it was Colin who said it. "Worse." They sat in silence, until Robbo said, "Some things don't change much, do they?" Ralph waved the observation away. "Go on," he said to Colin. "What happened then?" "Nothing happened," said Colin. "I keep telling you, it isn't a story. Mum and I just went on. Except that one day, I came home from school, and Mum had thrown away my boots." Pixie was horrified. "With the tobacco tin? How could she do that?" "It wasn't her fault," Colin said. "I'd had them for years, and they were far too small. She didn't know that there was something hidden in the toe." "Couldn't you tell her? Couldn't you get them back?" "You don't understand," said Colin. "It was a secret, the tobacco tin. I don't think she'd have liked it if she'd known." He walked his fingers through the strip of moonlight falling across the bed. "And it didn't make any difference. I still lay awake for hours every night. I was still hopeless in school." He walked his fingers back. "I still am, even at this school. I still get in trouble with teachers. Everyone always seems to be at me, even my mum. But what's the point in trying to explain how you feel? You know what happens. Everyone acts as if they're listening properly, but really all they're doing is softening you up, so you'll listen to what they're planning to say to you after. And that's always, 'Well, Colin, that's how things are now, and I'm sure you'll soon get used to it.'" His dark eyes flashed. "But I haven't got used to it, and I never will. I think about him every single day. I try to get on with school and everything, but it's like something waiting around a corner. It keeps rushing out and hitting me. I hear the name Jack, or walk past someone in a jacket just like his, or I'll be buying gum and see the cigarette papers he used to buy." He lifted his chin defensively. "Last week, I saw a birthday card he'd really like. It was a picture of a man being followed by a gang of scruffy dogs. I took it off the shelf and carried it round the shop for ages." Everyone waited. Then I put it back. "Colin," said Pixie after a few uneasy moments, "how long is it since you've seen him?" Colin turned to the window. 5 years. 5 years? He kept his back to them. 5 years, 8 months, and 7 days, he said. Flattening his palms on the sill, he leaned forward till his forehead touched the glass. "I think Mum thinks that I've forgotten him," he told them. "I never mention him at home. But even though I know he can't still be living there, I always secretly sneak his name and our old address on all the forms that Mum's filled in for school, to show he still matters and he's still my dad." He stood a little straighter. "But I never talk about him to her anymore. Never. It's part of my plan, you see. I'm saving up now. I save a lot. I keep practically every penny that comes my way. I even do 3 paper rounds. And I keep the money safe, somewhere a whole lot safer than in my boots. And one day soon, I'm going to have enough. Enough. Enough to go back and find him." He turned. With the moonlight behind him, the shadows fell more deeply on his face, making him look years older. "As soon as I'm tall enough, I'm off. There's no point trying yet. They'd only fetch me back, and it would lead to trouble. So I'm just waiting now. Waiting and hoping." "And listening to the music down at the rink," said Claudia. He grinned. "Mum thinks I'm mad," he said. "She doesn't understand at all. She asks me every birthday and every Christmas, 'Wouldn't you like a cassette player? Wouldn't you even like a radio?' But I always say no and take the money. And it sounds better anyway down at the rink. They play it loud. It bounces off the walls. It sounds so strong and cheerful, so like him, that when I shut my eyes, I can believe that he's still out there somewhere, sitting on a park bench, rolling his cigarettes and singing at the top of his voice." He turned to the window again and started humming softly. "Go on," said Claudia. "Sing the words." Colin broke off humming long enough to say, "I'm saving the words till I find him." "What words?" Ralph demanded of Claudia. "Words to what?" "Their favourite song," said Claudia. "The Bluebird of Happiness. It's on the skating rink's tape and comes round every hour or so." The humming stopped again. "Every 45 minutes, Colin corrected her, before picking up the tune where he left off. Claudia ignored him. "It's about following the bluebird round the world, but finding happiness where you began." They listened till the end. Then Robbo said, "I'm sure you'll find him, Colin. It's like one of those stories where you just have to keep going to reach the happy ending." "Fingers crossed," Ralph said. The others echoed him. "Fingers crossed." "And there you'll be," Robbo finished up triumphantly, "together again. You and your dad. End of story." And in the general passing around and unwrapping of sandwiches which then took place, only Claudia noticed that this time Ralph hadn't argued that Colin's father was a stepdad, and Colin had forgotten to insist that the tale he had told was not really a story. Ralph's Story. A Tale of Three Stepmothers. Ralph reached above his head to switch on the light. "Mine's not a tale of woe," he said, peeling the top slice of bread back from his sandwich to peer suspiciously at the filling. "But it is complicated, so you have to pay attention." He laid down his sandwich and started to count on his fingers. "I have 2 brothers, 2 half-brothers, 1 half-sister, 3 stepbrothers, 1 stepsister, 3 stepmothers, that's 2 old ones and 1 at the moment, 1 stepfather, 2 stepgrannies, and 1 stepgrandpa that I know, and some more that I don't know. And any day now, when Flora has her baby, I'm going to have another half-sister." He paused, looking puzzled, as if he'd surprised himself by ending up on the wrong finger. "Oh yes," he said, "and I have a mum and dad." Satisfied, he carried on. "On Mondays and Thursdays I go directly to Dad's place after school, and every other weekend Mum drives me there, unless it's the 3rd Saturday in the month when she has her hair trimmed. On that day my stepdad drives me. He's called Howard." He looked round as if to check they were still paying attention. "On Tuesdays, Wednesdays and Fridays, on the other hand, I go straight home to Mum's, unless my dad can't manage the following weekend, if it's his. Then I'm supposed to go to his house to make up, unless it's Wednesday. You see, I have orchestra on Thursday morning, and my horn's never at Dad's house unless we're close to a concert with Sunday rehearsals, and I was at Dad's house on the Sunday before." "Stop there," said Pixie. "I'm already lost." "How can you ever remember where you're going?" demanded Claudia. "You'd have to be a genius to work it out." "I used to get it wrong a lot," Ralph told them cheerfully. "I'd keep arriving at one house or the other and find no one there. I wouldn't know whether to sit on the doorstep and wait or go back to the other house. But then they bought me new lunch boxes, 2 with Mickey Mouse on the side and 2 more with Dumbo." "How did that help?" "Easy," Ralph said. "D for Dumbo and Dad, and M for Mickey and Mum. If I wasn't sure which house I was aiming for, I looked at my lunchbox." "Why 4? "A pair for each house," said Ralph. "And even then they'd sometimes both end up in the same place. And Mum or Annabelle would have to stick a label on the side saying, 'Not Mickey, Dumbo,' or 'Not Dumbo, Mickey.'" "Is Annabelle your stepmum?" "She was," said Ralph. "She isn't now. I don't see Annabelle any more, but I still see Angus and Patricia." "Angus and Patricia?" "My ex-step-granny and grandpa." "That's it," said Pixie firmly. "I'm giving up." Ralph stared at her. "For heaven's sake," he said, "you can't be lost already. I've hardly started to explain." Claudia patted his hand. "Don't try and explain," she said peaceably. "Just tell us the good bits." "That's right." Robbo backed Claudia up hastily. "Edited highlights only." Ralph screwed up his face and thought. "Right," he said. "Coming up, one of the best moments ever. This was with Annabelle, stepmother number 1. He noticed them staring. "That's what Howard calls her," he explained. "Who is Howard?" Pixie inquired of the air floating round her. "Do we know?" "I told you!" Ralph was outraged. "Howard's my stepdad, married to my mum." A shadow of confusion crossed his face. Have I mentioned Felicia, Alicia and Victor?
Let me guess, Robbo said.
They're your step-sisters and brother.
Half-sisters and brother, Ralph corrected him.
We all have the same mum. My step-brothers and sister belong to Janet.
Janet?
Stepmother number 2.
Robbo raised both arms like a referee trying to halt play.
Go back, he ordered Ralph. Go back and start again. Don't tell us anybody's name unless you must.
Right. Ralph began again.
Me and my real brothers...
He hesitated.
Oh, all right, sighed Robbo. Edward and George, said Ralph. We all went round to Dad and Annabel. Stepmother number 1. My brothers were a bit fed up, said Ralph. They didn't really like Annabel.
Again he hesitated.
No, that's not fair. They liked her well enough. She was good fun, and she bought super presents. It's just that she got on their nerves. The problem was that she never left any of us alone with Dad. She was always there, always. She came on every trip, even the boring ones like shopping or getting petrol. She sat through every meal and every telly programme. She even tagged along when Dad drove us back to Mum's house. I didn't mind. I was so little that I hardly noticed. But Edward and George just hated it. They said it wasn't fair. She had Dad to herself for half the week, so why couldn't she back off a little bit when it was our time? Dad might have chosen to have Annabel around all day, every day, George complained to Mum. I didn't, did I? Neither did Edward or Ralph. So why do we have to put up with her every single minute?
A look of sheer amazement spread over Colin's face.
He said that? To your mum?
Ralph picked his words carefully.
I don't think my mum comes out of the same box as your mum, he said to Colin. You can say practically anything to my mum.
He paused a little ruefully.
And she can say practically anything back. And she did this time. She nagged and nagged at Dad over the phone, but it was no use. He carried on as usual, letting his precious Annabel muscle in on everything, rather than risk the fuss of explaining how George and Edward felt. Spineless, my mother called him. But I think the problem was that he was in love. Totally, idiotically, soppily in love. He and Annabel spent all their time kissing and cuddling and giggling and calling each other Munchkin and Pusscat. Munchkin? Pusscat?
Everyone looked suitably disgusted.
He didn't seem to notice, Ralph explained. Everything Annabel did was fine with him. She didn't like jazz, so he stopped listening to it. She thought shop bread was stuffed with chemicals. So even if there was nothing in the bread bin, we had to wait for hours, starving to death, while she made more of her own instead of nipping up the corner shop. He shook his head. Annabel was always on a diet, he explained. And to be honest, I don't think she had the faintest idea how much a normal person eats. And she disapproved of coffee, so we all had to drink dandelion tea. He shuddered at the memory. Dandelion tea! And every morning Annabel read out her star sign forecast. And then she read it out again in the evening, explaining how you could look at it so it was almost right. And Dad didn't even laugh at her. And Annabel believed that everyone had an aura round their head, a sort of ring of colour that shows what kind of person you are and what sort of mood you're in. Nobody else can see auras, but Annabel claimed she could. Sometimes she'd look at Edward or George and say, "Your aura's looking very thin and grey. Did you have a bad day at school?" And even if they'd had a simply dreadful time from start to finish, they'd forced themselves to say, "No, it was smashing," just to embarrass her in front of Dad. He shook his head in wonder, except that Dad wasn't embarrassed. He'd just beam. "Cracked," said my mother. But I think it was just that he was dippy in love. Until the day... He broke off. A seraphic smile spread over his face. "Go on," they scolded him. "Get on with it." Until the day we had to bring Brandy with us. Brandy? Our cat. He couldn't stay at home, you see, because Mum was varnishing floors. I'm not packing you three off to your dad's and Felicia out in the pram with Howard just to have that fat, idle, inconsiderate pet of yours leave paw prints down my freshly varnished hall, so he'll just have to go with you. And if your dad makes a fuss, tell him from me he's lucky I don't send Brandy every week," she said. Colin looked suitably impressed. "You're right. Your mum can say anything." Ralph winced. We don't pass all of it on, he admitted. We didn't that time. We just rolled up with brandy squashed in a cage Edward had knocked up from a broken milk bottle crate and bits of wire. And Annabel went on about how cruel we were. Poor little Brandy, hardly room to breathe, till Dad distracted her by pointing out that we were out of bread again. Shall I send Edward up the shops? But no, Annabel insisted on making it herself. So we sat round the kitchen starving to death while Annabel fussed with yeast and kneaded and sang her lucky chant over the dough, then tipped it in the big brown china bowl to stand and rise. Again the seraphic smile suffused his face. And Edward said, Come on, George, let's go out. We'll take Ralph with us. And we went up the shops, where Edward spent the whole of his allowance on 3 large loaves, and we ate all of them on the way home. Then George and Edward brushed the crumbs off me, and we went back inside. The light of joy shone in his eyes. Annabel's dough had risen miles high, he said. It was a huge, puffy ball, bulging up out of the bowl. See, Annabel told us, isn't it worth the wait? She turned to get her baking tins out of the cupboard, and just at that moment Brandy leapt up on the table and sniffed the dough. Then he lifted a paw and patted it terribly gently. Ralph's grin was rapturous. And George looked at Edward. Edward looked at George, and George put his hand over my mouth so I couldn't say anything. He wriggled in ecstasy. And just at that moment, Dad came in the room. So we were all there to watch as Annabel turned round in time to see our fat old Brandy curling himself up comfortably on her dough and blinking coolly at her over the edge of the bowl while it sank like a parachute beneath him. He rocked on the bed in his rapture. And Annabel went mad, totally unhinged. You've never seen anything like it. She said that Brandy was an evil beast who had spoiled her bread dough out of sheer spite. Dad tried to stick up for Brandy. More than he's ever done for you children, Mum said afterwards. But Annabel wouldn't listen. I saw that creature for what he was the moment he came in the house, she said. He has a malevolent aura. Look at the purple ring around his head. Ralph spread his hands. And that was that, he said. Dad burst out laughing. He just couldn't help it. Malevolent aura, he scoffed. Our Brandy? Purple ring round his head? Don't be ridiculous, Annabel. Then he shooed Edward and George and me out of the room so they could carry on without us listening. But we didn't need to hear any more, really. The spell was broken, it was obvious. And though they kept calling one another Pusscat and Munchkin for quite a bit longer, in the end, Annabel ran off with someone who thought he was a descendant of King Arthur, and it took Dad ages to find her to get her to sign the papers for the divorce. Where is she now? Asked Colin. Ralph only shrugged. Don't you know? Colin asked, adding, astonished, Don't you mind? Don't you miss her? No, Ralph said. I can't say I mind. I can't say I even missed her. You see, she was more of a girlfriend of Dad's than a real stepmother. And anyway, straight after she went off, Dad took up with Janet, and that took all my attention for a while. Robbo settled himself more comfortably. Is this another highlight coming up? Ralph gave this a moment's thought before admitting, I think it would be fairer to call it a few lowlights. Press on, said Claudia. Off you go. Stepmother number 2. She was a real shock, said Ralph. Not one of us had ever come across anyone like her before. George thought Dad must have found her in a jail. He noticed the curious looks on their faces. Not in a cell, he added hastily. In the main office, running everything. She was more keen on rules than anyone I've ever known. Janet had rules about everything. Rules about what you could watch on telly and for how long. Rules about what time everyone had to go to bed and when they had to get up, even on Saturdays. She even had rules about what sorts of food you were allowed to take out of the fridge without asking. She used to treat a lump of cheese as if it were the crown jewels. He sighed. And meal times were the worst. Janet had rules about how you had to chew, and what you had to do with your elbows, and how to hold your knife and fork. There was a rule about not sliding the butter dish along like a hockey puck. There were rules about saying please and thank you and may I pass the bread. There was a rule about not starting to eat until everyone at the table had been served. There was a special knife for the butter dish. There was a special spoon for the spread. He shook his head in renewed amazement. And there was even a rule that no one could get up and answer the telephone if it rang, unless everyone round the table had finished their pudding. He scowled. I must have missed about 1 million calls. What about your dad? Didn't he mind? Mind? Ralph said bitterly. He liked it. He said after Annabelle it was wonderful. Sensible, he called it. Organised. And everyone else seemed to agree. Edward and George thought she was brilliant because they had tons of time alone with Dad while she was rushing between doctors and dentists and school shows and parents' evenings with Tom and Joe and Doug and Anne. He noticed their baffled faces. My stepbrothers and sister, he explained. Janet's own children. They moved in as well. Giving it a try, Janet called it. He scowled again. I could have told them all it wouldn't work. The house wasn't big enough. I didn't mind Tom so much, and Anne was quite nice, once you got to know her. But you'd need a castle for me to get on with Joe and Doug. Not that anyone listened to me, of course. What did your mum say? Ralph made a face. That's one of the things I don't understand, he told them. Mum and Howard thought Janet was wonderful. Maybe it was because she came so quickly after Annabelle. But it's so nice to have a bit of order in our lives for once, my mum kept saying. And credit where it's due, I've never seen your clothes come home so beautifully laundered. She even got those oil stains off Edward's shirt. Do you think I dare send her that cot blanket of Alicia's? My mum spent hours on the phone with her. In fact, she hardly bothered with my dad at all once Janet came. Anything complicated, dates for holidays, extra rehearsals, exchange visits to France, she just fixed up with Janet. What a joy, she kept saying, to deal with a woman who can draw up a proper schedule. Let's hope it lasts. And did it? Oh, yes, said Ralph. It lasted. He sighed. I think if anyone ever sends me to prison, I'll know exactly how to behave. I'll pick up the rules in no time. I'll know how to share a tiny cell between 3 people. I'll know not to leave any of my stuff lying about on someone else's patch of floor in case they trample on my things and break them. I'll know better than to be more than a microsecond late for any meal, because with so many people in the house, the person who cooked it can't be expected to think about saving things for latecomers. I'll certainly remember to take all my model cars off my bookshelves and lock them away sensibly in my cupboard where I can't even look at them at night. And I won't expect to get to watch what I want on telly more than once in a lifetime. His voice shook with scorn. I'll know to give a year's notice if I want a bath, and not to expect to get more than 1 measly sweet out of a packet if I have to share it round. I'll know how to read some very complicated charts about whose turn it is to wash and dry and put away, and dust and sweep the kitchen floor and wipe down the counters. His face was scarlet. Oh, yes, he said, I'll be brilliant in prison. Claudia said soothingly, But surely Janet's gone now. Yes, Ralph said, calming down. Janet's gone now. And at the thought of it, his spirits rose. She got fed up with Mum and Dad. First she said they were taking advantage of her. Then she said neither of them pulled their weight. And in the end she said that both of them had pushed their luck too far. What had they done? Ralph blushed. Well, Dad kept fixing up work trips on the days when we were there. You've got 4 anyway, he kept telling Janet. 3 more won't make any difference. And then Mum started sneaking Victor's romper suits into Edward's sports bag, hoping that Janet would come across them and get the stains out before sending them back. That's terrible, said Pixie. So unfair. My mum's a bit like that, Ralph confessed. Even Howard said she'd got no more than she deserved, and it would serve her right if stepmother number 3 sent back our socks and underwear without even bothering to wash them. He grinned. Mum blamed my dad, of course, and Dad blamed Mum. But nobody else gave a hoot. We were too happy. I could spread all my models along my shelves again. We ate out of pizza boxes and chip bags, and George even organised a ceremony for dropping the butter knife down the drain. He picked up his sandwich again. It was like suddenly being set free, he said. Wonderful. And we went on like that until last year. Stepmother number 3, they chorused willingly. They haven't married yet, said Ralph, but she's moved in. Her name is Flora. A look they hadn't seen before spread over his face, and he told them disconcertingly, Flora means flower, before falling silent. Claudia prompted him. Ralph? He seemed not to hear her, so she said it louder. Ralph! He started. What? Tell us. Tell us about Flora. He flushed. Oh, yes. Well, Edward met her first. He dropped in unexpectedly to pick up his school biology project on skin diseases and found her lying on Dad's patio with hardly any clothes on. Dad looked uncomfortable and said, "Edward, this is Flora. Flora, can't you cover yourself up?" And Flora said, "I'm enjoying the sun. Why don't you cover up Edward?" So Edward put a bag over his head, and they had a nice long chat about leprosy and nappy rash. "Very nice," murmured Pixie, but Ralph didn't seem to notice. He just carried on with his story. George didn't meet her till the day after. She came with Dad to pick him up for his viola lesson, and they went shopping for food. George said he'd never seen anything like it. Strawberries, kiwi fruits, waffles, Belgian chocolates. Dad nearly had a fit. He kept coughing anxiously and peering in his wallet. But Flora went on dumping treats into the trolley. And when they reached the checkout, Dad tried to make a stand. "We don't have room in the freezer for 4 separate ice cream tubs." Flora ignored him, George said. But seeing Dad squinting gloomily in his wallet again, the lady on the checkout picked out the bilberry and the toffee pecan and said to George, "Be a dear and put these back for your mother." Flora nearly dropped a bottle of luxury maple syrup. "I'm not his mother," she said. "I'm far too young to be his mother." And she looked absolutely horrified. But nowhere near as horrified as Dad, George said when he was telling us after. Mum rolled her eyes to heaven, and Howard laughed and said, "Here comes stepmother number 3. But I felt out of it, because I hadn't met her, so I hadn't anything to tell. "You've met her now, though?" "Oh, yes," said Ralph. "I've met her now." The strange look drifted back across his face. "Well?" Pixie demanded. With an effort, he dragged his attention back to them. "What?" he said. "Meeting Flora," prompted Claudia. "Oh, yes," said Ralph. "I met her the next day. Mum was sticking to Janet's schedule. It's like Annabelle's lunchbox trick," she said. "Too good to give up just because she's gone." So I went over to Dad's as usual, and Flora opened the door. "Hello," I said. "Here I am." And she looked me up and down and said, "That's very nice, but who are you?" He grinned. It wasn't easy to explain. I started by telling her, "I'm Ralph." But since she still looked blank, I thought I ought to add a bit, and the best I could come up with was, "I think I might be one of your new sort of stepsons." She didn't look frightfully pleased, I must say. In fact, she stormed off to the living room to phone my dad. I heard her through the door, sounding ratty. "What do you mean you can't get away from work?" I don't know what he said, but it can't have worked any better on Flora than Janet, because the next thing I heard was Flora slamming down the phone. Then she came back. "Your dad's got a cheek," she said. "I'm not a nanny." "And I'm not a baby," I snapped. Well, I was hurt. And then to prove it, I went in the kitchen. "I'm getting myself a cheese sandwich," I told her. But somehow a little bit of Janet must have stuck, because I couldn't help adding politely, "May I make you one too?" She stared for a moment, then snatched up her bag. "Don't bother making us sandwiches," she said, as if we were already some sort of team. "We'll eat out." "But what about Dad?" I asked, and she gave me a bit of a cool look. "What about him?" Ralph grinned, and I could see her point. If he couldn't even get home in time to introduce us on the day we met, why should we worry about him? So off we went. We had the best time ever. First we had Chinese food. Then she took me to a film about killer tomatoes. And then, while we were arguing about aliens on the way home, we bumped into some of her friends and went off to a coffee bar, where I took the chance to sneak away and ring Dad. "Where are you?" he squawked at me down the phone. "We're at the Purple Onion," I told him. "We're just having a nightcap with a couple of friends, and then we're on our way home." So naturally he went spare. "Do you know what the time is?" But I pretended that my money had run out. "Back soon," I said. But we weren't, because Flora took her time over her coffee. It was 11:30 when we got home. Dad was climbing the walls. "How could you do that?" he said to Flora. "It's getting on for midnight, on a school night." But Flora only pulled out the pins in her hair and tossed her head and told him cheerfully, "Oh, well, another time maybe you'll think twice about leaving him in my care without checking about my plans." She shook her hair into the most amazing fan around her face and winked at me from behind so he couldn't see. Again the vague, bewitched look spread over his face, and he fell silent, staring into space. "You're totally soft on Flora, aren't you?" Robbo said. Ralph made no effort to deny it. He just sighed. "I think she's wonderful," he admitted. "She's done all sorts of terrible things to me. She poured a bowl of spaghetti over my head when I was rude to her. She picks me up from school hours late. I practically finish my homework sitting in the gutter. She gets me in trouble sneaking me into films I'm not old enough to see, and places I shouldn't go. If I complain, she only says, 'Don't moan at me, I'm not your mother.' She's completely disorganised. She bought me the most amazing stone frog in the January sales, and then forgot my birthday. And now she's pregnant, she's impossible. Yesterday she sent me miles to buy a bottle of mint sauce for her sandwiches." "Mint sauce? For a sandwich?" "That's all she eats now," Ralph told them mournfully. "Mint sauce sandwiches. I worry about this baby. She'll never look after it properly. All the responsibility will fall on me. Mum says if Flora craves mint sauce, it's because her body needs it, and I should stop fussing round her like an old hen. But in all the baby books—" "You're never reading baby books." Robbo was aghast. Ralph stared. "Of course I am. This baby is my sister." Noticing Colin's eye on him, he corrected himself with an effort. "All right then, half-sister. Or half-brother, maybe. But either way, Flora's not going to be much use. She's only ever looked after a goldfish in her whole life, and that was found floating belly upwards in its bowl." He squared his shoulders. "No, I'm afraid it's up to me. But Mum has promised I can spend a bit more time round there, just till I get them better organised." Pixie asked curiously, "Doesn't your mother mind you being—" She hesitated, trawling for a more delicate way of putting it, and then gave up and copied Robbo's phrase, "being totally soft on your stepmother?" Ralph blushed. "She teases me about it a little. Everyone does. Yesterday, when I was sorting out the baby clothes that Mum is lending me, George even pointed out that I'm actually nearer in age to Flora than Dad is, so if she's going to marry anyone, maybe it should be me." A huge grin crossed his face. "But Howard said I should just thank my lucky stars that stepmother number 3 turned out a winner. Do you think she'll stay?" Ralph held up crossed fingers. "She's settling down," he said judiciously. "No doubt about it. George and Edward keep warning me not to bank on it. It might just be the baby. It might not last. But when I was helping her sort out some old toys and rattles and stuff, she picked up a fairy tale book she'd had since she was 4 and started to read. Once upon a time there was a beautiful stepmother who lived with her 3 wicked stepchildren deep in the woods." He grinned again. "I checked it later, and she'd changed it round. But I think, if she can make a joke like that, she must be settling down." "Oh, yes," said Claudia. "And after all, 3rd time lucky." "That's what I think," Ralph told them. "At least, that's what I hope." The soft look came back again, just like before. "3rd time lucky," he said, and held up his fingers, which were crossed again. Pixie threw herself backwards on the bed, tucked her arms under her head, and told the ceiling gloomily, "If it's 3rd time lucky, I've a long way to go." Everyone shifted round to face her. "Go on, then," said Robbo. "Tell us." Pixie sat up again. "Why? Am I next?" "I thought we were going round in a circle," said Claudia. "It should be Robbo now." "I don't mind Pixie going first, if she's ready." "Ready?" teased Ralph. "She's probably even worked out a title." "Yes," Pixie told him. "I do have a title. I'm calling my story The Pains in My Life." Ralph settled back. "All right then, but no fancy frills. We want the truth and nothing but the truth, or it won't count." "What makes you think—" But since she could already hear them sniggering, she thought it safer to begin. Pixie's story, The Pains in My Life. Really, of course, their name is Payne. But like me, you'd call them the Paynes if you met them. They're awful. Sophie and Hetty Payne. They drive me up the wall. I almost don't want to bother seeing my father anymore, now it means that I have to spend weekends at their house. Lucy, their mother's not so bad. I can ignore her. She makes a fuss of me when I arrive and asks the usual questions about school, but after that she tends to lose track of me. I used to disappear upstairs and only come down at meal times or when someone called me. And maybe we would have kept on that way forever, except that Sophie and Hetty had a terrible quarrel a few months ago, a real stand-up fight, and Lucy and Dad decided the sensible thing was to move Hetty out of her sister's bedroom into mine. Mine! It was agreed when Dad and Lucy bought the house that I'd have a bedroom to myself. I remember that. Mum remembers it. And even Dad admits that was the deal. No sharing bedrooms with my stepsisters. But then there was this fight. We'd all seen it coming. Sophie and Hetty had been niggling at one another for months. Hetty's using my calculator and she won't give it back to me. Sophie keeps switching channels while I'm watching. Hetty wore my blue woolly while I was out yesterday and now there's a hole in it. Sophie's sitting on the stairs and she won't let me past her. You'd think that they were 3 the way they went on. And you'd think they'd be used to it. Everybody else was. But no, all of a sudden there was this giant bust-up. Fists flying, hair pulled out in chunks, and all Sophie's little glass animals smashed to bits. So I end up with Hetty, in my room. One Friday I show up and lock myself away in peace and quiet as usual. And on the next visit I can hardly get in the room for Hetty's bed and Hetty's desk and Hetty's chest of drawers. What's going on? Dad looked at Lucy. Lucy looked at Dad. Then Lucy said, "We didn't think you'd mind. It's not as if you're here that much. Only a few days a month. And Sophie says she won't share with Hetty any longer." What could I do? What could I say? I could have tried to argue. I could have said that I'd been promised a room of my own. Everyone had said I wouldn't have to share. But it wouldn't have sounded very nice of me. It would have sounded rather petty and mean. Unless I added a bit about not being all that keen on coming anyway, and I couldn't really do that with Dad standing there, could I? And Lucy was right. A few days a month isn't much. It wouldn't really have mattered, except that even a day feels like a year if you can't stand the person 2 feet away from you. And I can't stand Hetty Payne. I just can't stand her. I'm not too keen on Sophie, to be fair, but Hetty drives me mad. I hate the way she cocks her head on one side and fiddles with her hair. I hate the way she sniffs without noticing whenever she's reading. I even hate the way she rolls the cat over the carpet like a sausage. But most of all, I hated the way she teased me about my name. "Lunchtime, Priscilla!" she'd yodel up the stairs. And though I wouldn't answer till someone else came along and called up Pixie, it still made me want to creep out of my room and drop a heavy pot plant on her head. And she'd been put in with me. I was supposed to get along with her from Friday after school to Sunday night on 2 weekends a month. "This isn't fair," I grumbled to my dad. "She's Sophie's sister, not mine. Let Sophie put up with her. Or let her use my room while I'm not there and move back with Sophie when I come. That would be fine with me." "Lucy thinks Hetty might find that unsettling," said my dad. "She thinks it's easier this way." Lucy thinks. But he was my dad before he was Lucy's husband. I'm only here for 2 weekends a month. Do you think it would kill him to try and stick up for me once in a while, instead of crawling round his new family as if everything about them mattered more? But none of them ever seemed to think about me. Nobody even asked. When all of us went on holiday for the first time, Sophie and I had a fight. We were supposed to be one brand new, big, happy family. And Sophie took the top bunk bed without even asking me or tossing a coin. I pulled her stuff off and threw mine up, and she hurled it down again. Then we were thumping each other and lashing out and snatching at one another's hair. The tears were streaming down our cheeks, but we never made a noise, not a single peep, in case Dad and Lucy came in from the next room and saw what a terrible mistake they'd made, and how much they were fooling themselves, and how stupid they were to think we would ever feel anything about one another except, "Get out of my life, please. Just go away." And I didn't feel any different about Hetty. In fact, I felt worse. Hetty is nearer my age, but we couldn't be more different. You only have to pin back your ears for half an hour to get your head stuffed to bursting with Hetty's gift for maths, and Hetty's natural good manners, and Hetty's way with animals, if you can call rolling a cat across the floor having a way with animals. Hetty is everyone's darling, except mine. When she holds up her homework with its neatly written excellent at the bottom, I want to snatch it from her and rip it up. When she reaches for her helping of pudding and starts with her creepy, "Oh, delicious, Mum," I want to push her face in it. And when she leans over to point out all the little mistakes in my maths, I want to stab her finger with my pen. So how to get rid of her out of my room? First, I tried a haunting. As soon as the light was out on Friday night, I stretched out my arm as far as it would go and started a scratching, scrabbling noise between the two beds. What was that? What? That noise? Wasn't it you? There was a worried silence. Then she said, "No, it wasn't me." "Oh, well," I said cheerfully, "maybe we're haunted," and left it at that until the next morning, when she went off for her shower. As soon as she was out of the room, I flung the window wide open. Luckily, Hetty never hurries in the bathroom, so by the time I heard her coming back and tugged the window closed, the room was icy cold. "What's going on in here?" she said. "It's freezing." I shrugged. "Strange thing," I said. "One minute it was fine, then just a moment ago, whoosh, it was like the Arctic." Clutching her towel round her, she went to the radiator. "Funny, the heating's still on." "Very odd," I agreed. "I thought this sort of thing only happens when there are ghosts about." She looked up. "You don't think—" "Here," I laughed. "There's no reason to think that horrible, horrible murder happened here." "What horrible, horrible murder?" I stared at her. "Didn't you know? I thought that everyone knew about poor Henrietta Forbes. How her husband accidentally locked her in a wardrobe, set fire to it by mistake, and then, without thinking, put the flames out with an axe." Hetty sat down on her bed. "I didn't know. Her ghost was seen up and down the street for years, but then a priest came and she was laid to rest. The story I heard was that the spirit of Henrietta Forbes would only walk again when someone with the same name lays their bed uninvited in her place." I finished up cheerfully. "So you're all right, then?" "No, I'm not," Hetty snapped. I spun round, pretending I'd just realised. "Hetty! Of course! It's short for Henrietta." But maybe I'm not as good an actress as I thought, because she suddenly cottoned on and grinned at me as if I were the cleverest person in the universe, just for thinking up some silly ghost tale. I realised there was no point in carrying on with the haunting. So next day, I tried something different to drive her out. Bothering her back. I waited until she was deep in her homework, then I picked up my maths book, littered with all the usual try again pixies and please see me's, and brought it over to her desk. "Can you explain things?" Can Hetty Payne explain things? Can camels spit? My stepsister can explain things till hell freezes over. I stood there bored out of my mind while she went through each problem and why you have to tackle it the way you do and where it's easy to go wrong. I got so bored I even started listening. And some of it must have accidentally stuck, because a week later, for the first time in my life, I found a neat little "well done" on my maths test. But it was still pointless. Hetty didn't even seem to notice me wasting hours of her time, let alone mind. After, without even moaning, she missed a couple of her favourite telly shows to write her essay, and then got up early next morning to finish her own maths. And that's when I tried the next tack to get her out of my room, the semi-silent treatment. "Are you coming swimming this afternoon?" "Maybe." "Don't you know?" "Not yet." "Well, can't you decide?" "When I'm ready." I kept it up all morning. I wasn't exactly not speaking. I wasn't quite sulking, but I certainly didn't make things easy. I hoped she'd suddenly get so fed up with me that she'd decide even her sister was better company and sweep her clothes off the end of my wardrobe rail and storm back to Sophie. I could imagine them discussing me behind my back. Mean, hateful, selfish, horrible. And I was almost right. She left the room, but not to go back to Sophie and crab about me behind my back. Oh no. Hetty the Payne went straight to her mother and told her what was going on. And Lucy showed up in my doorway. She was as mild and friendly as usual, but just from the way she was ready to break off whatever it was she'd been doing to talk to me, I knew she was taking this seriously. It mattered to her. And suddenly I realised that it was serious to me as well. It mattered even more. I'd gone for months just drifting through my weekends in their house as if there was some sort of half-time in a football match, and real life started again when I went home on Sunday night. I was sick of hiding my feelings. I was sick of holding my tongue. And most of all, I was sick of pretending. She'd better be careful, I thought. She'd better watch out, or this time she'll hear a bit more than she was expecting. She started off carefully enough. She perched herself neatly on the end of Hetty's bed. "I hear there's a bit of a problem between you two." "I don't think so," I said warily. "Hetty says you're not talking to her." "I'm talking." "Not properly," she says. I turned away. "Maybe I don't want to talk to Hetty all the time," I said. "After all, I'm not used to sharing a bedroom with someone who isn't family." "Hetty is family." "No, she's not," I said. "Not to me. Not really." I turned back and saw that Lucy was suddenly looking very nervous. She hadn't realised I was going to break the rules and say exactly what I thought for once. "She is your stepsister," she pointed out. "Yes," I said, "she's my stepsister. But you and Dad at least got to choose one another. You two decided that you wanted to live in the same house and share a room. Hetty and I have just been shoved in together. We didn't get to choose. We're just expected to pretend to get on so it suits everyone else." Lucy said slowly, "But don't you think that's true for pretty well everybody in the world? After all, you don't even get to choose your own parents, really, do you? It's only chance." I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. Here I was, trying to explain how I feel about having to share a room with someone I don't really like, who isn't even family. And Lucy's not even listening. She's sitting there thinking up stupid arguments to try and beat me down. "That's different," I snapped at her. "Quite different, and you know it." She went bright red. She knew that I was furious. Rattled, she tried another tack. "And I didn't choose you either," she pointed out, "but I still try to get along with you." Then, suddenly realising this might have sounded pretty nasty, she added hastily, "And your dad didn't choose Sophie or Hetty either, but he tries to get along with them. We both try." "So you should," I said rudely. "After all, it was you two who made things turn out this way, not me and Hetty and Sophie." And then, to spite her, I added, "Or my mum." That got her. You could see she was willing herself not to jump up and slap me. And I'm not even sure she would have got a grip of herself in time, except that just at that moment the door handle gave a little creak as it began to turn. Both of us saw it. It was unmistakable. I thought at first that it was Hetty the Pain come back to gloat. But when the door opened a crack, both of us could see from the height of the shadow behind it that it wasn't Hetty at all. It was my dad. We heard his soft intake of breath. Whoops! And the door closed again. He'd obviously sensed that there was trouble brewing, and rather than come in and help us sort it out, he just decided to stay safely out of things as usual. I wasn't in the least surprised, and neither was Lucy. But she was really irritated, you could tell, and past bothering to hide it. "That's right," she hissed scornfully at the door. "Creep away. Leave it all to the wicked stepmother as usual." Maybe I should have been more careful, but I was irritated too. It just popped out. "Nobody forced you to marry him." She turned on me. "No," she said icily. "Nobody forced me. And if I'd had the faintest idea what I was getting into, I wouldn't have done it in a million years." I was astonished, and I must have showed it, because Lucy added sarcastically, "No need to look so surprised. When was the last time you heard any of your friends saying they want to be a stepmother when they grow up? Never, that's when. And I can tell you why. Because it's not a life anyone in her right mind would choose. Better than being a stepdaughter," I muttered bitterly, "or a stepsister." "Oh, yes?" she said, stung. "Well, I don't think you can claim to have put too much of an effort into being either. You show up here twice a month. You don't take the slightest interest in anyone or anything around you. You sneak up to your bedroom as soon as you reckon you can get away with it, and only bother to come down to eat. I cook your meals for you, I change your sheets, I clean your room, I even wash your clothes, and you never even bother to thank me for any of it." "You can't have it both ways," I snapped. "Either I'm family," and here I made sure my lip curled, "or I'm not. And family don't have to go round thanking you for doing the cleaning and the cooking. Hetty can manage it? Oh, Hetty, I scoffed. Oh, of course, Hetty the perfect pain. She went bright red. Go on, she said, be as nasty as you like. But I know which I'd choose, a child who knows how to behave or one who doesn't. I scowled. I know how to behave. Do you? She raised her eyebrows. You insist you're not family, and here she imitated my scornful voice. But you certainly have no idea how to behave as a guest. You sit and take. You never stir yourself to offer to help with anything. And in all the time you've been coming, you've never so much as offered me a daffodil picked off a council roundabout. Now it was my turn to be stung. I gave you a present for your birthday and for Christmas. She laughed. Oh, yes, soap. And then more soap. Leftovers from your mother's gift drawer, I suppose. I hate it when she mentions Mum. Don't do that, please. Do what? She seemed genuinely astonished. Make snide remarks about my mother. Snide remarks? She stared. You have the nerve to call that a snide remark? You, who've just called my daughter a perfect pain? Now who's trying to have it both ways? I can't stand it when people sneer at me. I just go mad. She is a pain, I yelled. A total pain. Just like her sister. In fact, if you want to know, I can't stand either of your ratty, squabbling children. Lucy went deathly white, but I kept on. To tell the truth, I bellowed, I can't stand anything about this house. I don't like the people in it, except my dad, and even he's too busy making sure he doesn't show me any special favours to spend much time with me. I couldn't help it. I burst into tears of rage. There's nothing to do here, I sobbed at her angrily. There isn't even any point in going out, because I don't have any friends around here. So I'm just stuck upstairs in that boring little bedroom twiddling my thumbs, because all of my own stuff is back at the other house. But you could... I can't! I screamed at her. You think I can, but I can't! Mum doesn't like me bringing my things round here. She won't admit it, but whenever she notices that something's missing, she just keeps on and on at me about it until I bring it back. I didn't know. Nobody knows, I yelled at her. Nobody even asks. How would you like it? How would you like any of it? I wiped my tears away angrily with my sleeve. Being packed up every other week and forced to sit and be polite to someone else's boring family. I clenched my fists and stamped. Not even close family. Half the time when I'm here, I have to sit and listen to Sophie's and Hetty's doddery old relations droning on and on. That got her. Now listen. I've told you this before. Sunday is the only day when Nana and Grandpa can... I don't care! I howled at her. Why should I care? They're not mine. They sit in their armchairs trying to think of more boring things to say to me, to try and cover up the fact that they've just sneaked Sophie and Hetty some money and not given anything to me. Lucy went scarlet. She hadn't realised that I'd noticed that. You see? I crowed. You're going on at me to act like family and not give you boring old soap for Christmas. Why aren't you on at them? I see the presents they give Sophie and Hetty. I see the pokey things they give to me. But I don't blame them. In fact, I think they're right. We're not a normal family. It's only you who keeps on trying to pretend we are. It's you who keeps trying to have it all both ways. And then, to my amazement, Lucy lost her temper back. I'm not the only one who wants it both ways, she shouted, sizzling with rage. When it comes to that, I can assure you that your family walks off with the bronze, the silver, and the gold. She jabbed at the counterpane with her finger. You take your mother. She expects me to do everything for you while you're in this house, everything. But do I get any support from her? I do not. And if there's anything that annoys her, who gets the blame? Your father? No, me, of course. I'm in the perfect trap. I cannot do a single thing right, down to something as simple as taking you to the cinema. If I buy your ticket, I'm trying to bribe you or lure you away from her. And if I don't, I'm unspeakably mean, and I'm favouring my own children. Whatever I do, I simply cannot win. Now she was jabbing with another finger. Then there's your dad. He wants it both ways too. So long as I pretend that everything's fine, then your dad's perfectly amiable. He's all smiles. But if I say anything, it's very different. If I say a single word about your lack of manners in this house, or your mother's continual criticism, or the fact that he hasn't got the guts to speak to either of you about the things that make life difficult for Sophie and Hetty and me, then all of a sudden it's as if I'm the problem, not you three. He puts this look on his face as if to say, if Lucy didn't get so worked up about all these little matters, everything would be fine. And now she was pointing at me. And as for you, I thought you were supposed to be an intelligent girl. But you still managed to walk around this house as if you sincerely and honestly believed that without me and Sophie and Hetty, everything in your life would be hunky-dory. She threw up her hands. Go on then, carry on. I'm used to it. Go on, all three of you, treating me as if I'm the only problem in your lives. Keep on telling yourselves that if it weren't for the wicked stepmother, everything would be fine. Carry on living in your dream world. I don't know what it was about her calling it a dream world that annoyed me so, but I was furious. You're the one in the dream world, I shouted, playing happy families and expecting everyone round you to play it too. Well, I won't play. Why should I? You know I'm only here because I don't want to hurt my dad's feelings by saying I don't want to come here any longer. Lucy's face crumpled. Oh, Pixie, how I wish... Stop it, I yelled. Just stop it. You can't make things right by wishing them. You know that. That's just as silly and hopeless as me wanting you to get run over by accident so Mum and Dad can get back together and buy our old house back again. It isn't going to happen, and you ought to know it. All the blood in her face had drained away, and when she spoke, her voice was just a tiny croak. I have to keep trying, she told me. Can't you see? This is my home. This is my family. If everyone's unhappy, there's no point. Everything's spoiled. And she burst into tears. Everything's spoiled anyway, I told her. And I started crying too. She put her arms out, and I went to her. I couldn't help it. We sat together on the bed, both of us crying our eyes out. She stroked my hair. And then something curious happened. There was a tap on the door, and Dad was there, cautiously poking his head round with an "Are you two scrappers ready for a cup of tea now" look. But Lucy just said to him coldly, "Please go away." Maybe she thought that he was interrupting, but I don't think so. I think she was just fed up with him for ever staying out of things and not facing up to what was bothering everyone, and only creeping in when he thought the trouble was over and it was safe. And I felt the same. Dad could have done so much more to make things easier for all of us. He could have made an effort to find out what was difficult for me and help me explain to Mum and Lucy. He could have stuck up for me when I was right, and maybe even for Lucy when I was wrong. But instead, he just got on with his own selfish, quiet life, pretending he didn't notice things, or leaving them for Lucy, and never trying to sort out any of the horrible, horrible mess he'd made by changing all our lives forever. Lucy was trying hard enough. Why couldn't he? So I stuck up for her. Yes, go away. He didn't need telling twice. He disappeared. And Lucy squeezed me tight. Better? I sniffed. A bit, I said. And then I added, because it was true, I wouldn't want to be a stepmother. She squeezed me again. And I wouldn't want to be in your shoes. She shrugged. But then again, I wouldn't choose to be all sorts of people. And most of them end up managing somehow. I blew my nose. Lucy, what I said about not wanting to come except for not hurting Dad's feelings, that's not exactly true. Sometimes, when Mum's going on at me, I wish I could come and live here all the time. So I can't hate it that much. I blew my nose again. It's just that whenever Hetty teases me about my name or something, I want to go straight home again and never come back. Teases you? About your name? Calls me Priscilla. Lucy looked baffled. How is that teasing? My tears welled up again. Priscilla! I wailed. She took me by the elbows and shook me gently. Priscilla's a beautiful name, she told me, and so is Scylla. I think your parents did a lovely job of choosing what to call you. And somehow, because we'd finished up with Lucy saying something nice about both Mum and Dad, it felt as if the quarrel was over, with no bad feelings simmering away. I dried my tears and blew my nose again. Then I helped Lucy drag Hetty's bed back over the landing into Sophie's room. I don't mind, I kept saying. She can stay with me if she wants. But Lucy was firm. No, she said, you obviously do mind. So let's go back to how we were before. And if you ever change your mind and want Hetty back, all you have to do is tell me. All right, I said, pulling the bed covers straight again. All right. So now we're back exactly how we were before, except that everything's different. I'm not pretending anymore. Everyone knows how I feel, and I know how they feel. We're not just playing happy families. I know that Lucy still hopes we'll turn into one, but now at least she's letting us take our time. I'm still not crazy about my stepsisters. Hetty's a real pain, and Sophie still gets on my nerves, but we're managing better. For one thing, Hetty no longer yodels Priscilla up the stairs at me. Lucy's stopped that. And in return, I come down a lot more often than I did, and try to be more sociable. And if I'm cunning and bring down my books, I get some help with my homework. When I said that Hetty could explain things, I really meant it. I've understood a lot of maths for the first time since Hetty went over it with me. Miss Odell even told me last week that if I keep on like this, I might move up a set next term. And in return, I frighten Hetty out of her wits. Each bedtime, she creeps in and perches on the end of my downy. Tell me some more about the ghost of Henrietta Forbes. I've told you everything, I insist. I've told you about the time her ghost appeared at the bus stop, dripping gouts of blood, with her half-severed arm still clutching her bus pass. She nods. And I've told you about the time the puppies in the pet shop were found in the morning, stark staring mad, whining frantically and clawing at the bars whenever they were shown her photograph. She nods again. Yes, that was a good one. I could fetch Sophie, and you could tell us that one again. I shook my head. I hate telling the same story twice. Well, what about the time her bloodied corpse was found in the graveyard in the moonlight, sobbing and shrieking and scrabbling at her husband's grave? Have I told you that one? No, not yet. I'm sure I have. No, really, Pix, you haven't. She bunches up the feet end of my downy and wraps it round her, ready for a fright. Go on, tell me the story. It's better than listening to her read and sniff, so off I go. One horrid, dark and stormy night. After, she sometimes goes back to her room, but only if Sophie's there. If Sophie's gone to sleep over at somebody's party, or at Nanny and Grandpa's, then Hetz has to stay with me. We drag the mattress off her bed and drag it down the hall. Dad hears us giggling and comes out to watch. I simply don't understand why you two have to go through this performance time and again, he grumbles. You're ruining that mattress. Why can't you just leave it on Pixie's floor? We just ignore him. We know better than that. I don't think either of us wants to push our luck. She's still a little wary of me, and I still get on with her that bit better when all the lights are out, and I don't have to watch her cocking her head to one side and fiddling with her hair, or rolling the cat like a sausage across the downy. But just to tease him, one of us might mutter, Well, Lucy thinks. That always sees him off pretty sharpish. Well done, said Ralph. I believed every single word of that. Pixie shrugged modestly. Now tell us about the ghost of Henrietta Forbes. Needing no further prompting as usual, Pixie began. One night, during a fierce storm... Out of the darkness came the firm interruption. Not now, Pixie. Everyone turned to peer at the lump of shadow that was Colin. Why not? Will it make you nervous? We have to hear Robbo's story now, Colin explained. I don't mind skipping mine, Robbo said hopefully. Maybe you don't, said Colin, but I really want to hear it. I could save it for tomorrow. But everyone knew that by tomorrow each of them would have gone their separate ways with their own friends. This was the night for stories. And if Robbo hadn't told them his before they finally gave in to sleep, they'd probably never hear it. Colin is right, said Ralph. The ghost of Henrietta Forbes will have to wait. It's Robbo's turn. Off you go, Robbo. I can't. I don't know what to say. I don't know how to start. Easy, said Pixie. Start with my mum and dad and see what comes out. If you say so, said Robbo doubtfully, and he began. Robbo's story. Dumper's the problem. My mum and dad split up when I was only 6, so I don't remember much. I can remember my dad kicking a hole in the kitchen door when they were arguing once. My mother was crying, and I was fiddling with the nutcrackers, so maybe it was Christmas. I don't know. Dad came back a lot, and Mum would send Callie and me out in the garden while they stayed in the kitchen arguing and arguing. Callie kept going back inside to try to make them stop, but I just stayed out there, kicking the ball to myself over and over. And after a bit, Dad stopped coming round, and we had to start visiting him at his new place instead. I didn't mind, but Callie hated it. She said that it was cold and nasty and horrible, and the sheets felt funny. She tells me things I never realised, but once she's come out with them, I know they're true, and I can't understand why I didn't work them out for myself in the first place. They always stick, though. I can never fade them out. I can remember exactly which house we were walking past when she said, "Our dad went out to work for years and years to pay for a nice house and all the furniture, and now the Beards moved in and taken everything. It's not fair." That's what she calls him, the Beard. I don't think he's too bad, but Callie really hates him. She says he picks on her all the time. And it is true that when Roy first came, Mum only let him tick us off if we were doing something really stupid, like pushing wet fingers in a plug or chasing balls over the road. She never let him interfere with family stuff or anything to do with school. But since Dumper was born, Roy seems to have taken over. Now he goes round telling Callie and me what to do, as if the fact that he is Dumper's dad makes it all right for him to lord it over us as well. I don't mind terribly, but Callie hates it. Sometimes she stands behind a door and does this imitation of him under her breath. "Brush your hair, please, Callie. It looks like a rat's nest. Have you done your homework, Callie? Did you remember to lock your bike? Is this your mess on the floor? Would you clean it all up, please?" She sounds just like him. Sometimes she even holds one of her furry slippers up against her chin to be the Beard. "Callie, have you dusted the stars yet? And polished the moon? And is it your turn to wipe the grease off the sunbeams?" Once I fell down the stairs backwards laughing and had to be taken to hospital to have an X-ray on my head. But Callie won't admit it's funny. One night, when he'd been getting at her for leaving wet towels on the bathroom floor, she told me she'd put rat poison in his food if she thought she could get away with it. And if it weren't for Dumper. Dumper's the problem, you see. He's only 3, and he's the sweetest child in the whole world. Even Callie admits that. I never thought anything about babies till Dumper was born. I thought they were just boring. But when Roy took us to visit Mum in the hospital, he scooped this tiny knitted bundle out of its little swinging plastic tub and put it in my arms. And suddenly it sneezed. The neatest little sneeze you ever heard. And its eyes popped open in surprise, and it stared up at Roy peering over my shoulder. Roy said that Dumper was far too young to be staring at him properly. But Mum and I knew better. And Dumper's proved us right. He's been following Roy round ever since, like a little baby duckling. Sometimes the twins next door borrow him for their games. "Shove Dumper in the cupboard. Then when he bangs, pretend he's the monster." "No, let's play prisoners. Put him in his cot." "If we put this red hat on him, he could be Santa." "No, let him be a frog. Kiss him and see if he turns into a prince." But as soon as Dumper hears Roy coming through the gate, he struggles till they let him go and rushes down the stairs into Roy's arms. Mum shakes her head and says he's definitely his dadda's son. And Callie makes that little face that Roy can't stand and whispers to me, "Nice that he has the chance. At least he and his dadda get to live in the same house." But I don't really mind. I think it's nice to see Roy turning Dumper upside down and pretending to use him to vacuum the carpets. The week that Roy announced his mother was ill and went away, Dumper was awful. "Want Dada! Dada coming home soon. Make Roy come back now, Wobbo!" It nearly drove me mad. By Thursday I was halfway up the wall. When Callie heard the gate click and said, staring out of the window, "Surprise, surprise, here's the Beard back again," I almost felt like cheering. Dumper went tumbling down the stairs in his excitement, and Callie took great pleasure in tormenting Roy all through the evening. "How was your mother, Roy? Which hospital was she in? Who else was visiting? What's wrong with her exactly?" From all his fudging and squirming, I realised that Callie had been right all week. Roy's mother wasn't ill at all. He'd obviously had a row with Mum and just stormed out. "How did you know?" I told you, said Callie. Nobody ever rushes off to visit someone in hospital without a phone call. And there was no phone call that night. Just lots of hissy whispering in their room. And Mum had red eyes in the morning. And even you noticed how much more polite she was to Dad on Saturday. In fact, I think... Her voice trailed off. I knew what she was thinking, and gave her a good long look to tell her so. She went bright red. It's not impossible, she said. People do get back together. You never know. It might happen. But Dumper's the problem. I'm not sure how Dad would take to looking after him if he came back. And anyway, Roy might not want to leave his only child with someone else, especially not Dad. They might start squabbling about it. And Callie and I know only too well how horrible that can be. I couldn't bear to think of poor little Dumper sitting at the table fiddling with the nutcrackers while everyone else is arguing around him. But Callie still thought that it was worth a try. Look, you skip the weekend with Dad and drag Mum off to the arcade to get your new soccer boots. Phone me as soon as you know what time you'll be there, and I'll think of some excuse to drag Dad out shopping. Then, when we've all bumped into one another, I'll fake a coughing fit and make them take us in that cafe for a drink. She's smart, my sister. Everything went like clockwork. We sat round one of the marble-top tables in Gina's ice cream parlour, and Callie tried to start things off. Well, this is nice. I backed her up. Like being a real family again. You're in a real family, Mum reminded me sharply. Don't snap at the boy, Hope, Dad said irritably. You know exactly what he means. And off they went, grinding away at one another as usual, with Dad wanting to know why Mum had let me skip my weekend at his house if I wasn't playing in a match, and Mum saying she was surprised that either of us ever bothered to go at all, given his grumpy moods. In the end, Callie and I slipped off our seats and went to stand in front of the display of ice cream cakes. Well, Callie said sarcastically, this is going well, isn't it? They're hopeless when they meet. She turned to stare at me. That's it. They're hopeless when they meet. So we'll try something else. And so we did. The something else turned out to be a load of bare-faced lies. Mum says to thank you for returning my woolly. Dad says it was really nice of you to send him that list of my soccer fixtures. Mum says you cook much better curries than Roy does. Dad was pretty impressed by the nifty way you beat his next-door neighbour to that parking space. We got really good at it as the weeks passed. I even began to think of myself as an ace troubleshooter, keeping the peace between two hot-blooded scrappers. And after a while, something strange happened. Without even noticing, they started to do the job for themselves. Ask your dad if he'd like to have you for a couple of extra days over half-term. Tell your mum if she needs some new tyres on that car of hers, I know a man who gets them very cheaply. Don't forget to take that spare fruitcake round to Daddy's house. Why don't you give Mummy these plant cuttings Aunt Sue left me? I know I'll never manage to make them grow. Callie was getting pretty confident now. We're doing well, she told me. We're almost there. But I wasn't nearly so sure. I reckoned there was still a big difference between the two of them trying to get along like reasonable people, sending each other unwanted fruitcake and plant cuttings and things, and their wanting to get back together in the same house. But I didn't want to spoil things for Callie, whose eyes lit up at every little niggle between Mum and Roy. The beard's in trouble again, she'd tell me, grinning. He's fixed up some overtime for the evening she wanted to go out. Or, Mum's dead cheesed off. He left the shopping lying on the table, and now that ice cream's melted in the tub. She'd come in my room in the morning and tell me, hopefully, I think they had another little spat last night. I tried to warn her. Lots of people argue. It probably doesn't mean what you think. It did with Dad, and Roy has stormed out once already. And he came back. But Callie had got it all worked out in her head. You wait and see. One day, Mum and the beard will have a giant row, and he'll push off just like before. But this time, instead of moping, she'll get in touch with Dad. Her eyes fell on the chubby little fists fighting their way out of the sleeves of a desperately flapping soccer shirt 8 sizes too big. Dumper's the problem, of course. Both of us watched him silently for a moment. Then Callie said, Well, Dumper will simply have to learn to cope. You have, and I have. So Dumper can as well. But Dumper's only 3. He's nearly 4. And it was on his birthday that the row came. But it wasn't between Mum and Roy when it happened. Well, not at the start, at least. At the beginning, it was between Callie and Roy. He caught her pushing her bike down the very narrow space between the bushes and the car. "Callie, you know you're not supposed to do that. Go round." "I'm in a hurry." "You can't go that way. You'll scratch the car." "No, I won't." "Callie, I'm warning you. Come back right now." Callie scraped the bike fiercely along the bushes, breaking stems. "You can't tell me what to do. You're not my father." He caught her by the wrist and swung her round. "That's my car you're about to scratch. It's sitting in our drive, by our house, in our garden. Listen," he hissed in her ear. "I've just about had enough of you." Tears spurted out of Callie's eyes. "And we've all had enough of you. You're a big meddling pig, and you're nothing to do with us. You're bossy and horrible, and even Mum's sick of you." I think he might have slapped her then, but just at that moment, Mum threw open the window. "Roy, let go of Callie at once, please." Roy stared up the garden. He was open-mouthed. "Are you taking her side?" "I'm not taking any side at all," called Mum. "But she wants you to let go of her, and I want you to let go of her." "Because she's not my daughter, is that it?" He dropped Callie's wrist, as if it had scorched him. "Well, let me tell you something, Hope. If I'm good enough to get up half an hour earlier than I need every morning to drive her to school, and good enough to work overtime to pay for repairs to the roof over her head, and good enough to trail round the supermarket for her favourite foods, then I'm good enough to stop her carelessly scratching my car." Mum slammed the window shut, and that was it. The row was on. They tried a dozen times to sort it out over the next few days, but every discussion ended with flaring tempers and banging doors, or with silence and cold looks. It seemed they couldn't come to terms at all. Roy was insisting he had every right to make Callie do what he told her, and Mum was arguing that it wouldn't help. "Believe me," I heard her say over and over. "It's better if you leave all that to me. Callie's so proud, and if you push it, all that will happen is she'll start to hate you." Start? I could have told them both something, but I kept quiet. And slowly, the days went by. It was quite obvious that things were getting worse and worse. On Wednesday, Callie was 20 minutes late for school because Roy suddenly decided he wasn't going to drive her anymore. "I only give lifts to people who are civil to me," he announced. "And Callie barely speaks." On Thursday, he came back without the only cereal Callie likes. "I only shop for people who say thank you as if they mean it." And when the snow began on Friday evening, he made it clear that even though Mum's car was in the garage being fixed, he wasn't driving us to Hawksmoor Hill with our toboggans. "The slope in the garden's good enough for Dumper, and after all, as Callie says, you've all had enough of me." "Pig," Callie muttered, gazing out at the glorious white flurries. A tear rolled down her cheek, and I knew she was remembering the time Dad hurried us out of the house into the car, and we were the first on the hill. First to make tracks over the huge, perfect, winking blanket of snow. First to hurtle down the steep slopes without having to steer round people dragging their sleds up again. First in the whole white world, or so it seemed. With her finger, Callie tracked another snow tear down the window pane. "I wish—" But she couldn't say it, and I pretended she'd meant something else. "Maybe Roy will feel differently tomorrow." She shrugged. She couldn't care. "Maybe he will." He didn't, though. Roy's as stubborn as Callie in his own way. All morning he made a great show of keeping busy, clearing out the shed. Dumper trailed after him, of course, to and fro under the kitchen window, as Roy carried one armful of junk after another along to the dustbins. Mum opened the door a crack against the icy wind. "Come inside, Dumper." He shook his head so fiercely his woolly hat fell on the snowy path. Mum tried again. "Dumper, you're freezing out there. Come in with us." Callie and I watched from the window as Dumper turned his back and stamped off. "Roy, send Dumper in, please. He's going blue with cold." Roy just pretended not to hear and disappeared in the shed. Pulling her boots on, Mum went after them. Callie opened the window so she could listen better. Blasts of wind swept in, lifting her hair, and gobs of sleet blew in her face, but she didn't notice. She was determined to hear every word. "Roy!" Mum rattled the latch of the shed door. "Roy, can you persuade Dumper to come back inside?" Roy poked his head out. I think it's obvious he wants to stay with me. Mum stood her ground. It's very cold. I'd like him back inside, please. Why? Aren't 2 children out of 3 enough for you? Mum told him, icy as the wind that swirled sleet in her face. That's a ridiculous thing to say. It's not a matter of dumpers taking sides. Roy lifted another box of broken plastic plant pots. I don't see why not. You obviously have, so he can too. What's that supposed to mean? Roy didn't answer, so Mum turned to Dumper, who was standing forlornly in the snow, sucking a sodden mitten. Come with me, Dumper. Dumper looked anxiously at Roy, who simply handed him a little pile of plastic flower pots to carry to the dustbins. Beside me, Callie hissed, The beard's a pig, an interfering pig. I hope he stays out all day and freezes to death. But Dumper was the problem. For just a moment, it looked as if Mum might lose her patience and reach down to snatch him up. But she thought better of it. All of us know it's almost impossible to keep Dumper from Roy's side when he's at home. And anyway, I don't think she could face the idea of Roy watching her carrying him screaming and thrashing back to the kitchen. So in the end, she simply said to Roy, with as much dignity as she could muster, I hope you'll come to your senses in a few minutes and bring him in. He didn't, though. The 2 of them had carried at least 3 more loads to the dustbins before Mum cracked. Robbo, she said to me, please try and get him to come in for me. I had to go. I took the tiny pair of dry gloves Mum handed me and went outside. The freezing wind gusted straight down the neck of my jacket. It was so cold, I played my best card first. Dumper, if you come in, I'll throw balls for you to headbutt. Dumper just shook his head. I turned to Roy. Mum's worried about him. She wants him back inside. Roy took the dry gloves from me. He's wrapped up perfectly warmly. It's only snow. He peeled off Dumper's wet mittens, then prized open the clenched little fists to pull on the gloves. Dumper's fingers were stiff with cold, and Roy's weren't much better. Why are you doing this? I asked. Why choose today to clear the shed? Dumper would follow you if only you'd come in. Come into what, though? Roy asked sarcastically before stamping off. And I couldn't answer, because I knew exactly what he meant. Come into a house that was colder to him in its own way than working in a January garden. Come into wintry little looks and icy silences and frosty glares. But then I thought of something and called after him. You could at least do it for Dumper's sake. Roy swung round. His eyes flashed to match the droplets of snow glistening in his beard. Don't tell me what to do for Dumper's sake, he snapped. I'm still here, aren't I? Isn't that enough? I stared. It honestly hadn't ever occurred to me that if it weren't for Dumper, Roy might not still be in our house. I realised for the first time that when Roy took off that week, he hadn't intended to come back again. Why hadn't Callie guessed that? It was the sort of thing she always used to work out first. Perhaps she'd been so busy wishing him gone, she hadn't noticed that if it weren't for Dumper, he'd have been just as glad to stay away. So Dumper was the problem for Roy as well. I think it must have worried Roy to see me staring at him for so long, not saying anything. In the end, he broke the silence himself. All right, he said. Take Dumper in with you. Dumper put on his stubborn look. Come along, I said, holding out my hand. Dumper hid both his hands behind his back. I could tell we were in for a long haul, and so could Roy. What do you reckon? He muttered to me over Dumper's head. Strawberry rocket, I mouthed. I tried my best shot already, don't forget, and Dumper's passion for ice lollies lasts all year round. OK, Roy told Dumper. I'm sending Robbo in to fetch you an ice lolly, and when it's finished, you go back inside. Is that a deal? Dumper nodded. Every toddler has his price. And then he trailed me to the kitchen door and stood there grinning at Mum while I fetched a strawberry rocket out of the freezer. Right, I said, anchoring its thin stick more firmly through a hole in his glove. As soon as that's finished, in you come. He nodded again and stamped off through the snow. I turned to Mum and Callie. Success, I announced proudly. Well, more fool me.
The three of us stood in a line and watched for nearly an hour as Dumper outsmarted us. Not once did he stick out his tongue to take so much as a lick from that strawberry rocket. The thing stayed upright, pink and perfect on its stick, and in the icy air, colder than any freezer, it didn't even begin to melt. "I'm going out to fetch him now," Mum kept insisting. But though she put her boots on several times, it was quite clear she couldn't face another argument with Roy. "He's totally mad," said Callie, wiping yet another viewing hole in the misted pane. "Why won't he come back in the warm?" "Because he's his dadda's son." I must have heard Mum say it 1,000 times, but always before it sounded patient and amused. This time it sounded different. It sounded trapped. "I didn't mean Dumper," said Callie. "I meant Roy. Why won't he come inside?" I honestly can't explain quite what it was that made me tell her. I'd like to kid myself it was because I'd suddenly realised Mum had had enough of being the umpire between Callie and Roy. And how could she stop? If she gave up believing that one day the two of them might learn to live together under one roof, she'd have to ask Roy to leave. Then either she'd lose Dumper or Dumper would lose his precious dada. But maybe I was as fed up as Roy with the grim atmosphere inside our house. The whole business seemed to me suddenly to have gone on far too long, like one of those soccer matches that turn to stalemate almost as soon as they begin and drag on forever. No loose balls, no flying passes, no brilliant breakaways. Coach always tells us, "Force it open, boys." "I'll tell you why he won't come back inside," I said. "Because he's as fed up as we are. He feels unwelcome in this house. In fact, he'd really like to leave, but Dumper's the problem." Mum sank on the edge of a chair as if I'd punched the stuffing out of her. "Robbo, that is a terrible thing to say." You can trust Callie to come up in support when it's a chance to have a dig at Roy. "You know you've been arguing recently," she told Mum. "Everyone has arguments," Mum defended herself and Roy. "Children Dumper's age are tiring, very tiring. Most of our arguments are about silly little things like ice cream left to melt and babysitting mix-ups. If Roy and I could only have a little break occasionally, there'd be far fewer of these little spats." "They're not all little spats," I persisted. "Roy did walk out on us for a whole week." Mum flushed. "That was quite different. That was—" Glancing at Callie, she broke off, but Callie met her eye. "I know what you're going to say. That was about me." Mum nodded. "It isn't easy," she said. "You get upset with him, he gets upset with you, and I'm stuck in the middle." She shook her head. "Never mind. It's just a matter of time, I'm sure." "Coach says, keep up that pressure. Push them hard." "How can it just be a matter of time?" I argued. "Roy moved in almost as soon as Dad moved out, and you've been getting on with Dad 100 times better than Callie's been getting on with Roy." Mum stared at me. "What has got into you today? Why are you coming out with all this?" "Because I'm fed up with it all," I told her. "I want to start over again. New season. Fresh game." I gave Callie a really meaningful look. "And maybe even fresh teams." Callie stared back, as if at last she'd understood what I was prodding her to try and say. "Yes," Mum agreed. "A good idea. Let's all try again. New season. Fresh game." I noticed she'd missed out fresh teams, and so did Callie. "No," she said firmly to Mum. "Don't carry on pretending. There's no point. I can't get on with Roy. I've tried and tried, but I can't stand him." She saw the look on Mum's face, and her voice rose to a wail. "Don't look at me like that. You know it's true. I just can't bear him. I can't bear his face, or his voice, or his beard, or anything about him. I can't stand him when he's trying to be nice, and I can't stand him when he's cross with me. I especially can't stand him telling me what to do." The tears were pouring down her face. "Don't tell me I'll get used to it. It isn't going to work. I know it. Robbo knows it. Even Roy knows it. And if you're honest with yourself, you know it too. I'm never going to get used to Roy. Never, ever, ever. He's never going to feel like family to me. He's like a stranger in the house." She dropped her voice to a whisper. "And when he's here, it doesn't even feel like home to me anymore." I watched the second hand swing round the clock. Don't lose it now, Callie, I was willing her. Go on for goal.
Mum stretched out her arms, and Callie threw herself on her knees on the floor and buried her head in Mum's lap. Gently, Mum patted her hair to comfort her. Frankly, I thought it could only be the whistle now. Time up, game over, lost it by a hair. But I was wrong. Callie's next words came out so muffled that neither of us could hear them properly, but they came out. Mum stopped the patting and looked up at me. What did she say? Sometimes you have to take a risk to finish the game. I took a deep breath. I think she probably said she wants to go and live with Dad. Mum looked as if I'd slapped her. But Callie doesn't even like your father's place. She says it's cold and gloomy and not like a real home at all. Callie just buried her head deeper in Mum's lap, so once again it was up to me. I think she'd still rather be there, even without us, than here with Roy. Mum stared at the wall. Again I watched the second hand on the clock sweep round and round. All I could hear was Callie's muffled sobbing. And finally, Mum found the courage to lift Callie's tear-streaked, stricken face. Do you really dislike him that much? Do you really? And finally, Callie found the courage to nod. So, there we are. My sister's moving to Dad's house at the end of next week. She'll have to change schools, but not even that's going to stop her. Mum spent the last few weeks reading poor Dad the riot act about checking Callie's homework properly and not letting her out with her friends on any school nights. And his whole house has been done over too. Mum's been round a dozen times, changing Dad's curtains for nicer ones, because they're warmer and Callie easily catches colds, and putting pictures and photos and plants all over, because they're Callie's favourites, and even dragging Dad on shopping trips to the arcade. Because Callie's very interested in new bath mats and table lamps, Dad said sarcastically. But you could tell he didn't really mind. I think that in a way he was relieved that Mum was helping him make the place look more like a home. Right, Mum said last night as she dumped Callie's new sheets and blankets on the bed. I'm finished now. I think you're properly sorted out. Dad followed her back into his new, cosy sitting room. You'll need a holiday after all this work. Fat chance, scoffed Mum. You could look after Robbo, of course, but Dumper's the problem. I looked at Callie. Callie looked at me. She knew she owed me one. Like Dad, she knows it hasn't been easy for Mum over the last few weeks, telling the school, explaining to her friends, comforting me. We could look after Dumper here, she said. Instantly I charged up behind her in support. Yes, why not? He'd love it here with us. He'd have a ball. I realised Dad could hardly have made a fuss, not after all Mum's work. But even I thought he showed far more enthusiasm than he need. His eyes lit up. Yes, why don't you and Roy push off together somewhere very soon? I'm sure the two of you could do with a nice break. So much for Callie's dreams of mended love. But still she didn't seem to mind. She watched him pat Mum's hand and say, Yes, you leave Dumper here with us. He'll be no problem. And she just grinned. That's right, she said. Dumper's no problem. None at all. See? Coach is right. New season, fresh teams, brand new game. Surprised both by himself and by the tale he'd told, Robbo raised both arms in a victory salute. I did it! Pixie told me to start with my mum and dad, and out it all came. My story. Ralph tactfully let the moment of triumph pass before pointing out, It was your sister's story, really. Same thing? No, that's not true. Ralph reached for the album lying on Pixie's bed. Your sister has more in common with Richard Harwick than with you. Both of them can't stand their stepfathers. Both of them have to leave. And you're not like that. So I'm like little Charlotte, am I? Ralph grinned. No, I'm just saying Callie's story isn't yours. Everyone's story is different. There was a fresh patter of rain against the windows as Robbo thought about it. Then he asked Ralph, Do you think Callie really ought to stay? No. Ralph's surprise was evident. Why? Robbo shrugged. You know, Being like Richard Clayton Harwick, running away. Ralph told him fiercely, "You mustn't say that. Your sister isn't running away. She's simply trying something different to make things work. She's only doing what everyone has to do over and over. I've done it, Pixie's done it, so has Claudia. You heard their stories." He swung his arm round. "And even Colin, when he finally runs away, is going off to find something that worked for him before. He's not just going to disappear." He caught the look of unease that flitted over Colin's face. "Are you?" he demanded. There was no answer. "Are you?" he said again. "Ralph," Claudia said softly, "better leave it." Ralph waved away the warning. "You saw his face. He isn't simply running off to find his stepdad. He plans to disappear." "How else is he supposed to run away?" Robbo demanded. Ralph answered irritably, "Don't be so dense. There must be a dozen ways to keep in touch without letting anyone find you and drag you back. And Colin's probably thought of all of them. He's had enough time." "Maybe that's the point," Pixie defended Colin. "Maybe he's had too much time. Maybe he thinks it's someone else's turn to sit at home missing someone horribly, wondering where they are and what they're doing." Ralph spread his hands. "I understand how he feels, but he can't do that." "Why can't I?" Colin asked him sullenly. "Because, like Richard Harwick said, you'd just be piling one wrong onto another, till everything was broken from the strain." "She should know how it feels," Colin insisted stubbornly. Ralph's voice was very much gentler now. "Misery isn't a baton in a relay race," he said. "You can't get rid of it just by passing it on." "You don't know anything about it." "I know what everybody knows," insisted Ralph. "Unhappiness works like one of those huge snowballs you see on parks. The more you roll it round and round, the more there is of it. And your tiny bit that started it stays in the middle, cold and hard, where you can't get at it any more, and where it lasts the longest." He snatched up the album. "That's why I'm glad that Richard Clayton Harwick isn't here tonight. I'm glad we didn't have to sit and listen to him telling his story. I might have told him something. I might have said that he didn't try hard enough and he didn't try long enough. He just threw in his chips and made a ruin of his house and home." Colin was unconvinced. "And what's so wrong with that?" Ralph spun the pages through his fingers. "What's wrong with that? I'll tell you what's wrong with that. It means he was behaving no better than them." He tossed the album back on the bed. "Somebody has to make the effort," he reminded them. "And as we all know, the ones who mess everything up in the first place aren't quite so good at fixing things again after." The longest silence fell. Pixie reached for the album and turned the pages over one by one. Colin stared stubbornly out of the window at the grey ribbon of cloud lightening steadily to pink. Robbo inspected his fingers, and Claudia watched Ralph. Outside, the stain of darkness gradually slipped away, and the faded stripes on the far wall were suddenly shot with silver. Claudia spoke. "It's time to put it back." Without a word, Pixie handed her the faded binder. Robbo pushed open the full section of wall, and Ralph followed Claudia into the little tower room. Gently he spun the globe as he went by. The quiet rumble filled the room as Claudia first laid the album back on the spindly wooden desk, then, changing her mind, pulled out the drawer beneath and slipped it safely away, far at the back, well out of sight. When she drew out her fingers, she held a tiny splinter of wood. "What's that?" "The leg from Charlotte's little wooden cow." "Oh, right." Ralph turned away and sprang the window catch. It moved as easily as if he'd done it yesterday, 100 years ago, and all the days and nights between. Far, far beneath, the driveway wound into the dark of the shrubbery. The lawns lay shrouded in the silver mist. Somewhere an owl hooted. "He could have tried again," insisted Ralph. She came to join him at the window. "Perhaps he thought he was the only one." Ralph's voice was thick with scorn. "How could he think he was the only one? Stories from the old days are knee-deep in stepmothers and stepfathers." Claudia picked up the little wooden cow and stroked its nose. "Everyone thinks that they're the only one. You ought to know that." She held the little leg against the cow. "He could have fixed that too," Ralph told her irritably. Claudia took one last deep breath of cool, damp air. "Daylight creeps over the sill," she said, remembering. "Come on. Let's do what Richard Harwick says. Let's leave it to the spiders in their webs to argue whether he was right or wrong." Ralph pointed to the little cow. "Better leave that." But Claudia tightened her fingers round it. "I was just thinking," she said, opening her other hand to show the broken leg. "I was just thinking maybe Richard Harwick wouldn't mind if we gave this to someone who'll need a bit of practice fixing things." Ralph pulled the window shut and turned the latch. "Do you mean Colin?" She nodded. "Here, give it to me." This time she followed him out of the room. Carefully she pulled the door closed behind her. The shaft of bright dawn light had slid across the wall, leaving the telltale pockmark in shadow again, invisible, inviolate. Pixie had disappeared upstairs. Colin was already asleep, and Robbo watched in silence as Ralph thrust the precious little wooden cow and its small leg deep into Colin's bag. And then he grinned. "It's not exactly a bluebird, is it?" he said to Ralph. "But it might work." And not expecting any answer, he drew the coverlet over his head as Claudia crept quietly from the room.